The manga opens on a quiet night illuminated by the light of a full moon. The sky is clear, and the forest below is bathed in silver moonlight. In the middle of this peaceful scene, a mysterious voice suddenly appears and welcomes someone to its world. At that very moment, a brilliant flash of light erupts near Kakuri Woods. The glow is so intense that it briefly outshines the moon itself. Not far away, an armed man immediately notices the strange phenomenon and stops in his tracks. His companion looks at him in confusion and asks Zeke why he has suddenly stopped walking. Without taking his eyes off the distant glow, Zeke explains that something is shining from the direction of Kakuri Woods. His companion follows his gaze and notices it as well. She admits that it is certainly unusual but points out that if it is some sort of magical phenomenon, it is outside their jurisdiction. Since dawn is approaching, she believes they should simply continue on their way. Zeke, however, remains uneasy. He explains that a short while earlier he had a strange feeling that something important had happened. For this reason, he suggests that they at least go and investigate. The story then shifts to the source of the mysterious light. Deep within Kakuri Woods, a young woman lies unconscious on the forest floor. The strange voice appears once again and gently tells her to go on and live a healthy and gentle life. A flashback begins. The scene changes completely, revealing a large modern office building filled with employees. Inside, workers are chatting with one another while carrying out their daily tasks. Computers hum quietly in the background while papers and documents move from desk to desk. Among the many employees is a young woman named Kirika Risa. As lunchtime arrives, Risa happily opens her homemade lunchbox and announces that it is finally time to eat. The contents are neatly arranged and clearly prepared with care. A coworker notices it immediately and comments that Risa's bento looks wonderful as always. She jokingly remarks that Risa does an impressive job taking care of herself despite being single. The conversation turns toward meals and daily routines. The coworker points out that dinner time must be approaching as well and asks whether Risa still cooks for herself every evening. Risa confirms that she does. Right on cue, the coworker suddenly produces a small box of sweets and offers it to her as a present. Risa happily accepts the gift and thanks her. Curious, she asks how her coworker's recent overseas trip went. The coworker explains that the trip was wonderful overall. The architecture was stylish and beautiful, and there were many interesting sights to see. However, she admits that the food was disappointing. Risa immediately becomes interested and asks what was wrong with it. The coworker explains that the food was not inedible. Rather, it was simply unsatisfying. No matter what she ate, she never truly wanted to continue eating it. Even the water felt wrong. According to her, the water was too hard and completely unsuitable for making green tea. It worked well enough for black tea, but it lacked the qualities she preferred. As she prepares to leave, she reminds Risa that the sweets are at least worth looking forward to. Risa smiles and thanks her once again for the treat. Afterward, she reflects on the conversation. The idea of traveling abroad sounds exciting. More than anything else, she dreams about going on a food tour and experiencing delicious cuisine from different places. Compared to her coworker's adventures, she feels slightly jealous. The manga then introduces her properly. Her name is Kirika Risa. She is 22 years old. Aside from her love of food and cooking, she is simply an ordinary office worker living an ordinary life. However, everything changes only a few hours later. The flashback ends as Risa slowly begins regaining consciousness. When she opens her eyes, the first thing she sees is a full moon hanging in the sky above her. The second thing she notices is a tiny winged figure hovering nearby. The creature immediately expresses relief that she has finally awakened. Risa stares at it in shock. In her mind, she realizes that rather than traveling abroad, she appears to have been transported somewhere completely unfamiliar. Terrified, she jumps and demands to know what she is looking at. The small creature quickly apologizes for startling her and explains that it is a spirit. Furthermore, it seems surprised that Risa can actually see it. The spirit introduces itself as a nature spirit whose role is to act as a mediator between humans and the goddess of this world. Risa remains unconvinced. She decides that she must simply be exhausted. After all, the previous day had been perfectly normal. She had left work, stopped by a donut shop, eaten dinner, taken a bath, and gone to bed. Suddenly, she reaches a conclusion: this must be a dream. The spirit immediately becomes frustrated and begs her to stop trying to escape reality. Risa insists that she is obviously asleep. The spirit then reveals the truth. According to it, The goddess invited her into this world while she was sleeping. Risa is horrified. Rather than an invitation, it sounds much more like a kidnapping. The spirit apologizes and explains that Risa's presence in this world is necessary. Even so, Risa struggles to take the explanation seriously. Although the spirit is adorable, it is difficult for her to believe such an unbelievable story. Trying to be practical, she asks whether she can simply be sent back home first. In her opinion, if someone needs help, they should at least explain the situation properly before dragging that person somewhere else. The spirit hesitates. Then it lowers its head and offers a sincere apology. It explains that crossing between dimensions threatens the balance of worlds and could potentially lead to extinction-level consequences. For this reason, dimensional travel is strictly one way. There is no method of returning. The moment those words reach her ears, Risa freezes. She asks the spirit to repeat what it just said. The spirit calmly explains that those are simply the rules. Risa's eyes widen in disbelief. Internally, she desperately tells herself to remain calm. Unfortunately, the situation feels more and more like a nightmare with every passing second. Sometime later, Risa finds herself resting inside a comfortable mansion. She lies on a large bed beneath warm blankets. The bed is incredibly soft and comfortable. For this reason, she once again tries convincing herself that everything is merely a dream. However, she soon hears voices nearby. A man asks whether she is truly all right. The spirit replies that rather than suffering from any transfer sickness, she is merely exhausted and needs rest. A woman immediately expresses relief upon hearing this. The moment Risa hears the conversation, she bolts upright and demands to know where she is. An elderly gentleman standing nearby smiles warmly and explains that she is currently inside his residence. He adds that he is relieved she appears to be recovering better than expected. Risa looks between the unfamiliar faces in confusion. Before she can say anything, the woman suddenly hugs her tightly and tearfully declares how happy she is that Risa has finally awakened. She admits that everyone was worried she might never regain consciousness. Meanwhile, Risa can only wonder who these people are. The woman continues talking emotionally, explaining that the thought of a young girl being left alone in a dangerous forest was unbearable. The man gently reminds her to calm down before she overwhelms their guest. Realizing her mistake, the woman apologizes and steps back. Risa introduces herself as Kurikawa Risa and politely says that everyone may simply call her Risa. The man introduces himself as Guilford Hyde Claude, the master of the house. He then introduces his wife, Anastasia. Anastasia cheerfully invites Risa to call her Tasia. Risa thanks them both for helping her and apologizes for her poor manners. Tasia immediately explains that the person most deserving of thanks is actually the spirit. According to her, the spirit remained beside Risa throughout her unconscious state and informed them of everything that had happened. Guilford then explains that a patrol of knights reported witnessing a mysterious light. As a royal magician, he was tasked with investigating the phenomenon personally. Upon arriving at the location, he discovered Risa. Therefore, the strange glow was apparently the moment she entered this world. Risa immediately asks whether there is any way to return home. Guilford regretfully admits that he does not know of any method. However, he promises to provide whatever assistance she needs. Since she currently has nowhere else to go, he offers her a place within the Claude household. Risa hesitates and says she does not wish to inconvenience them. Tasia insists that perhaps this outcome was also part of the goddess's plan. Guilford clarifies that he believes their meeting carries some divine significance. In his view, there must be a reason why fate brought them together. He further remarks that he could never abandon a girl in trouble. Tasia jokingly comments that he sounds rather charming. She then asks Risa whether she is truly feeling alright. Risa says that she is fine thanks to everyone's kindness. At that exact moment, her stomach growls loudly. Embarrassed, she awkwardly points out that her appetite seems perfectly healthy. Tasia laughs and declares that this is excellent news. If her appetite has returned, then she must be recovering well. She immediately suggests having something to eat. She also explains that Risa's clothes are currently being washed and encourages her to use anything in the wardrobe. Grateful for their generosity, Risa thanks them once again. After they leave, she reflects upon her situation. Being transported to another world should be an incredibly serious problem. Even so, she cannot help feeling relieved that such kind people found her. She then remembers to thank the spirit. To the spirit's surprise, Risa does not appear angry at all. Instead, she reasons that the spirit was not responsible for bringing her here. If anything, the spirit seems genuinely concerned about her well-being. The spirit becomes touched by her kindness. When Risa asks what she should call her, the spirit reveals that she does not actually have a name. Finding this inconvenient, Risa decides to give her one. After thinking briefly, she chooses the name Basil. Basil immediately lights up with happiness. Receiving a name is an enormous honor for a spirit. She enthusiastically promises to do her best to serve her master. Risa awkwardly accepts the gratitude while wondering why Basil suddenly started calling her master. Later, after changing into one of Tasia's dresses, Risa examines herself in the mirror. The outfit is much frillier than anything she would normally wear. Tasia, however, is delighted and insists that it suits her perfectly. She proudly explains that the dress comes from her own clothing brand. Guilford adds that Tasia is the head of a successful fashion company. Risa is amazed. Between the luxurious mansion and Tasia's status as a business owner, the Claudes resemble celebrities more than ordinary people. She cannot help feeling slightly out of place. Eventually, dinner is served. At first glance, the food appears simple compared to the lavish surroundings. Guilford encourages her to eat without hesitation. Risa happily accepts. She begins with a dish resembling rice porridge mixed with milk. The moment she takes a bite, she pauses. Then she tries another dish, and another, and another. Tasia happily comments that her appetite seems healthy. Risa politely replies that she simply cannot identify the ingredients. Internally, however, she is horrified. The food is terrible. Later that evening, she collapses onto her bed and reflects on the situation. She reminds herself that this world is completely different from Japan. Naturally, the cuisine would be different as well. Opening her window, she decides to remain positive. Surely every world must have good points. From that day onward, Risa studies diligently. Living within the Claude residence, she learns about Feliformia, a prosperous kingdom blessed with abundant resources. People coexist with spirits, and magic serves the same purpose as electricity and gas. Daily life depends heavily upon magical tools, resulting in living standards surprisingly similar to those of modern Japan. She also learns that magicians such as Guilford form contracts with spirits by giving them names. Through this process, they gain the ability to use magic without relying upon tools. Most people cannot see spirits at all. Strangely enough, although Risa can understand and speak the local language perfectly, reading and writing remain difficult. Therefore, she begins studying. Despite numerous challenges, she feels she is adapting remarkably well. Unfortunately, all of her confidence crumbles whenever she hears a particular phrase. Every day a maid politely informs her that her meal is ready. To Risa, those words sound less like an invitation and more like a demonic summoning ritual. At dinner, she struggles once again with the local cuisine. The bread is so hard it barely breaks apart. Even dipping it into soup fails to improve it. The soup tastes like concentrated salt. The salad is drenched in oil. The meat leaves her wondering what unfortunate creature gave its life for such a result. Eventually, she sets down her knife. Tasia notices immediately and remarks that she hardly seems hungry. Risa internally laments her situation. Being abducted by a goddess is one thing. Having delicious food taken away as well feels like outright cruelty. Guilford notices her expression and gently asks whether something is troubling her. He encourages her to share any concerns she might have. At last, Risa reaches her limit. No matter how beautiful, magical, or impressive this world may be, she simply cannot tolerate it any longer. Standing abruptly from her chair, she finally explodes. Why is all the food here so disgusting? Thus, 1 week after arriving in this new world, Kirikar Risa reaches her absolute breaking point. The moment Risa loudly declares that all of the food in this world is disgusting, the entire dining room falls silent. Guilford and Tasia stare at her in complete shock. For a brief moment, neither of them seems capable of processing what they have just heard. The food is gross, they repeat in disbelief. Meanwhile, Risa immediately realizes what she has done. Her face turns bright red as embarrassment washes over her. Until this moment, she had only been complaining internally. Somehow, without realizing it, she ended up shouting her thoughts out loud in front of everyone. The maids react even more dramatically. Several of them immediately bow their heads and begin apologizing. They assume they must have made mistakes while preparing the meal and start blaming themselves for the poor dining experience. Risa quickly waves her hands and tries to stop them. She explains that this is not what she meant at all. The problem is not their cooking skills. Rather, the food culture of her world is very different from the food culture of Feliformia. For this reason, she simply has not become accustomed to the flavors of this world yet. The servants slowly raise their heads while Guilford considers her explanation. After thinking for a few moments, he nods. According to him, her explanation is perfectly logical. If she comes from an entirely different world, then naturally her expectations regarding food would also be different. Curious, he asks what people normally eat in her homeland. Risa begins explaining. Rather than discussing her entire world, she focuses specifically on the country where she grew up. According to her, staple foods commonly include rice and noodles alongside bread. The moment the words leave her mouth, both Guilford and Tasia look surprised. Rice? Noodles? The unfamiliar terms sound completely foreign to them. Risa continues her explanation. She mentions seasonings such as miso and soy sauce, both of which are commonly used to create rich flavors. Once again, the couple repeats the strange names aloud. Neither of them has ever heard such ingredients before. Risa then casually mentions sweets and desserts. This revelation only creates further confusion. Guilford wonders whether sweets are considered a main dish. He admits that he has never encountered anything remotely similar. Even Marie appears fascinated. The maid comments that she cannot even imagine the foods Risa is describing. However, if she could understand how such dishes are prepared, she feels confident she could eventually reproduce them herself. Those words immediately trigger an idea inside Risa's mind. Her eyes suddenly brighten. She politely excuses herself for a moment while organizing her thoughts. Marie looks confused. Then Risa makes an unexpected proposal. She asks whether it would be possible for her to borrow the kitchen. Tomorrow, she intends to prepare a meal for everyone living within the Claude mansion. The announcement catches everyone by surprise. Tasia initially looks concerned. She begins saying Risa's name as though she wants to stop her. At that moment, Risa starts worrying internally. Perhaps she was too blunt. Perhaps insulting the local cuisine was already bad enough. Now she is practically announcing that she can do better. Just as she begins imagining the worst possible outcome, she notices Tasia's expression. Instead of looking offended, Tasia's eyes are sparkling with excitement. Turning toward Guilford, she enthusiastically reminds him that Risa just offered to cook food from another world. Guilford immediately agrees. He admits that he can barely contain his anticipation. The idea of tasting completely foreign cuisine sounds incredibly exciting. Seeing their reaction, Risa cannot help smiling. Of course they would react this way. Rather than becoming upset, they are fascinated. Marie quickly begins making arrangements. She explains that the head maid is currently responsible for organizing tomorrow's meals, but she will personally inform her regarding the change of plans. Feeling guilty for causing additional work, Risa bows respectfully toward Marie and apologizes for such a sudden request. Marie immediately dismisses the concern. According to her, there is no need for apologies. In her opinion, sharing food between different cultures is one of the best forms of exchange imaginable. She believes everyone in the mansion will love the opportunity. Those words strike a chord with Risa. Her eyes light up. Cuisine truly is a form of communication. Food allows people to understand one another without requiring complicated explanation. As she later flips through recipe notes and mentally reviews various dishes she knows, she reflects upon her past. For the last several years, she has lived alone. As a result, she has spent countless hours cooking for herself. Now, however, she wants to use those skills for someone else. The Claude family has taken care of her ever since she arrived in California. For this reason, she wants to prepare the best meal she possibly can. Unfortunately, there are several problems. The ingredients available in California are different from those she is familiar with. Rice appears to be non-existent. Bread can be made, but proper yeast would require several days of preparation. This severely limits her options. While she is deep in thought, Basil suddenly interrupts. The spirit reveals something interesting. According to the goddess, certain ingredients found in California closely resemble ingredients from Risa's original world. Risa immediately looks up in surprise. Really? Basil happily confirms it. She then proudly reminds Risa that she is a nature spirit. Since she governs plants and wind, she possesses extensive knowledge regarding vegetables, wheat, grains, and countless other crops. The mention of vegetables and wheat immediately captures Risa's attention. She begins organizing possibilities in her mind. Various recipes flash to her thoughts. Then, after a period of intense consideration, inspiration finally strikes. That's it. Excited, she quickly explains her idea to Basil. The following morning arrives. Wearing an apron, Risa confidently enters the mansion kitchen. Basil accompanies her while several maids gather around curiously. With a smile, Risa announces the menu. Today's breakfast will be pasta. The kitchen staff immediately looks confused. Pasta? None of them have heard the word before. Risa explains that pasta is a type of noodle dish with many different variations. Because countless sauces and toppings can be used, people can enjoy a wide variety of flavors. Even better, the ingredients are surprisingly simple. Only wheat flour, eggs, and salt are required. She assures the maids that the recipe is easy enough for everyone to remember. The servants become even more surprised. The ingredient list is far shorter than they expected. Risa apologizes for choosing such a basic recipe. However, since she wants to prepare food for the entire Claude household, she needs something practical and scalable. The maids immediately reassure her. They insist that she should not worry. Everyone is happy to help. With that settled, the cooking lesson officially begins. Risa pours flour onto the work table and forms it into a large mound. She instructs everyone to shape it into a hill. Afterward, she creates a hollow depression at the top. Marie observes the structure and comments that it resembles a volcano. Risa agrees. The comparison is surprisingly accurate. Next, she cracks eggs into the center. Marie immediately points at the mixture and remarks that the volcano now appears to be overflowing with magma. The image is so vivid that several maids begin laughing. Risa quickly tells Marie that she is making the lesson sound ridiculous. Marie responds with an awkward smile. Nearby, another maid attempts to follow the instruction. Unfortunately, her flour mound collapses completely. Panicking, she announces that her volcano has already erupted. The maid looks as though she is facing a disaster. Risa calmly reassures her that everything is fine. Since the ingredients will be mixed together anyway, a collapsed flour mountain is hardly a problem. The lesson continues. After adding salt and warm water, Risa explains that the egg mixture must gradually be combined with the surrounding flour. The ingredients slowly transform into a unified dough. Once everything becomes homogeneous, the next step is kneading. The maids eagerly begin copying her movements. Almost immediately, complaints begin appearing. Several servants point out that the dough keeps sticking to their hands. Marie, however, appears to be having the time of her life. She seems to enjoy the process more and more with every minute that passes. After the dough reaches the proper consistency, Risa instructs everyone to cover it with damp towels. Then she explains that the dough needs to rest. The moment she says this, several maids gasp in surprise. They stare at the dough as though it has suddenly become a living creature. One maid nervously asks whether the dough can actually sit down and rest. Another maid seems genuinely concerned for its well-being. Watching their reactions, Risa cannot help smiling. Apparently, this world interprets cooking terminology very differently from her own. For the first time since arriving in California, the kitchen is filled not with confusion or frustration, but with laughter, excitement, and curiosity as everyone gathers around to learn the secrets of another world's cuisine. After the dough has been left to rest, the maids continue staring at it with curiosity. Since the idea of dough resting sounds strange to them, Risa takes a moment to explain the purpose behind it. According to her, allowing the dough to sit for a while helps it become smoother and easier to work with later. The explanation seems to satisfy everyone, and the kitchen staff eagerly prepares for the next step. Since there is still time before the dough is ready, Risa decides to begin preparing the sauce. Turning toward Marie, she says that she would like to work on the sauce while they wait. Marie immediately brings over the ingredients Risa requested earlier. However, even while carrying them, she admits that she still has no idea how they are supposed to be used together. As Risa examines the ingredients and considers possible combinations, Basil suddenly flies over carrying several vegetables. Proudly presenting them, Basil announces that she has gathered the mallows Risa requested. Curious, Risa picks one up and takes a small bite. Its appearance resembles an eggplant, yet the flavor reminds her strongly of tomatoes. Basil explains that the vegetable is called zalana. Risa tastes another ingredient and realizes that it is remarkably similar to spinach from her own world. The more ingredients she samples, the more excited she becomes. Although the names are different, many familiar flavors seem to exist in California after all. Looking toward a nearby tray, she asks Marie about a particular type of meat. Marie explains that it comes from a bird known as a toto. After hearing this, Risa immediately decides that it should work perfectly. For this reason, she announces that they will use it in the sauce. Meanwhile, roughly 20 minutes pass, and the dough has finally finished resting. Risa gathers everyone around the work table and begins demonstrating the next stage. First, the dough is rolled out until it becomes thin and flat. Once it reaches the proper thickness, she explains that it needs to be cut into squares. She then turns toward Marie and asks whether there is anything in the kitchen with a jagged blade similar to a pastry cutter. Marie pauses thoughtfully. After hearing the word jagged, she apparently arrives at a very different conclusion. A short while later, she proudly returns carrying a large saw. The sight nearly causes Risa to panic. Quickly stopping her, Risa explains that this is definitely not what she meant. Embarrassed, Marie awkwardly puts the saw away. Deciding that a normal knife will be safer, Risa begins cutting the dough herself. She carefully slices it into small squares and then demonstrates how to pinch the center of each piece. As the shape forms, the pieces begin resembling tiny butterflies. The maids watch the process with fascination. Several of them comment that the pasta looks like little ribbons. Risa smiles and explains that this variety is called farfalle. The kitchen staff immediately starts repeating the unfamiliar name. Once everyone understands the process, Risa entrusts the pasta preparation to the maids while she focuses entirely on the sauce. The servants happily agree. Soon the kitchen becomes filled with activity. While the maids shape dozens of tiny pasta butterflies, Risa stands over a pot carefully stirring ingredients together. As she works, she reflects that it has been quite a long time since she last prepared a tomato-style pasta sauce. Watching the process, Marie suddenly notices something. She points toward the pot and asks whether Risa really intends to put mallow into the sauce. Risa asks whether that is unusual. Before Marie can answer, Basil explains that mallow is categorized as a fruit in this world. That revelation immediately amuses Risa. Apparently, even another world cannot completely agree on whether tomato-like foods should be considered fruits or vegetables. Meanwhile, the maids finally finish preparing the pasta. Rows upon rows of tiny butterfly-shaped pieces now cover the tables. Risa praises everyone's efforts and announces that they did an excellent job. The next step is simple. The pasta is placed into boiling water and allowed to simmer until cooked. Afterward, it is mixed together with the freshly prepared sauce. Eventually, breakfast is complete. The finished dish is brought before Guilford and Tasia. The couple stares at it in amazement. The colorful sauce coating the butterfly-shaped pasta looks unlike anything they have ever seen before. Guilford asks whether this dish truly comes from Risa's world. Risa proudly explains that it is called farfalle pasta. The sauce is made using Toto bird meat combined with solana and mallow. Tasia immediately praises its appearance. According to her, the dish looks absolutely beautiful. Even before tasting it, the aroma alone is making her hungry. Guilford agrees and announces that there is no reason to wait any longer. After offering a brief prayer of gratitude, he takes his first bite. At that exact moment, Risa becomes incredibly nervous. Although she personally enjoys the dish, the people of Feliformia have very different tastes. What if food from her world is just as strange to them as their food was to her? Unable to watch, she closes her eyes. A few moments later, Guilford suddenly declares that the pasta is delicious. Risa's eyes snap open. She immediately asks whether he is serious. Guilford assures her that he would never lie. According to him, the springy texture of the pasta pairs perfectly with the sauce. The combination is unlike anything he has ever experienced. Tasia is equally impressed. She comments that she never imagined mallow could be prepared in such a way. Nearby, Marie proudly congratulates Risa. However, Risa immediately gives credit to everyone who helped prepare the meal. Without the assistance of the maids, she never could have finished such a large quantity. Tasia then encourages her to stop standing around and eat while the food is still warm. Realizing she has not tasted the finished dish yet, Risa finally sits down and takes a bite. The moment the familiar flavors reach her tongue, she releases a deep sigh of relief. It is a simple tomato-style pasta. Nothing particularly extravagant. Yet at that moment, it tastes more precious than any gourmet meal she has ever eaten. For the first time since arriving in Feliformia, she feels connected to home again. At the same time, she notices something else. Everyone around the table is genuinely enjoying food inspired by her world. Watching their smiles, she realizes that cuisine truly is a form of exchange. Food creates connections. It allows people from completely different backgrounds to understand one another. In that sense, it acts like a bridge linking hearts together. Eventually, everyone finishes eating and expresses gratitude for the meal. The breakfast is an overwhelming success. Unfortunately, the success creates a new problem. The Claude mansion becomes completely obsessed with pasta. Morning, afternoon, and evening meals all begin featuring pasta in one form or another. Every day someone requests another variation. As the craze continues, Risa starts searching through recipe notes while desperately trying to remember other dishes she can introduce before everyone turns into pasta enthusiasts permanently. Not long afterward, her attention shifts toward another goal. One day she stands before a container and proudly announces that it is finally finished. Inside is a homemade yeast culture. She happily remarks that she is relieved yeast exists in another world as well. Basil looks confused and asks what yeast is. Risa explains that she created it by fermenting fruit native to California. With proper yeast available, she can finally begin making soft bread. If only she had access to rice as well, she would have all the staple foods she misses most. At the mention of rice, Basil reveals an interesting piece of information. According to her, rice does exist in California. However, it is primarily used as livestock feed. The grain itself is rarely sold in markets. Most people only use the chaff for feeding animals. The revelation fills Risa with mixed emotion. On one hand, rice actually exists. On the other hand, obtaining it may prove extremely difficult. For a moment she feels disappointed. She wishes she could somehow get her hands on some. Then, almost instantly, her usual optimism returns. Since there is nothing she can do about rice for now, she decides to focus on her current objective. Soft bread comes first. Several more days pass. The pasta craze continues spreading throughout the Claude mansion. Eventually, while waiting for a batch of bread dough to rise, Risa decides to leave the estate for a while. As she prepares to depart, several maids gather near the entrance. They express concern about her wandering around the city by herself. Risa reassures them that she will be perfectly fine. After all, Basil will be accompanying her. The maids reluctantly accept her explanation but insist that she contact the mansion immediately if she needs anything. Risa thanks them and heads out. Since the bread requires time to rise, she packs several homemade cookies as a snack and decides to enjoy a leisurely stroll through the city. Together, she and Basil wander through the bustling streets. The city is filled with life. Merchants call out from storefronts, customers move between market stalls, and magical tools assist people with countless daily tasks. Surrounded by the unfamiliar sights of California, Risa smiles brightly. With Basil flying beside her and cookies tucked safely away for later, she happily announces that she is going exploring. As Risa continues her first real exploration of the town, she cannot stop looking around in amazement. Every street seems filled with details that capture her attention. The old stone roads, the unique architecture, and the magical atmosphere make the entire city feel like something taken directly from a fantasy film. Unable to contain her excitement, she remarks that the place looks exactly like a movie setting. Flying beside her, Basil happily agrees. The spirit admits that she enjoys being outside as well and particularly likes the gentle breeze flowing through the streets. Risa smiles at the comment. When she first arrived in this world, she was far too overwhelmed by everything that had happened to even think about sightseeing. At the time, she was focused entirely on understanding her situation and coping with the reality that she could never return home. Now, however, things are different. She has begun adapting to life in California. For this reason, she decides that she should allow herself to enjoy the experience. After all, she is living in another world. If she spends all of her time worrying, she might miss the opportunity to appreciate it. Just as she is enjoying the scenery, a sudden gust of wind sweeps through the street. Her hat is immediately lifted from her head and carried away. Startled, Risa cries out and reaches toward it. Before the hat can travel too far, Basil quickly flies after it. The spirit catches it effortlessly and guides it back. Risa gratefully accepts the returned hat and thanks Basil. She comments that being able to control the wind must be incredibly useful. Basil appears pleased by the compliment. As they continue walking, Risa begins noticing something she had previously overlooked. Tiny spirits seem to be everywhere. Some sit on rooftops while others float lazily through the air. A few gather together in groups, quietly whispering among themselves. Others simply appear to be relaxing and doing nothing in particular. The street is practically overflowing with spirits. Curious, Risa asks Basil whether there are always this many around. Basil explains that old districts are particularly comfortable places for spirits. Ancient buildings, long histories, and established neighborhoods tend to attract them naturally. Risa nods in understanding. The explanation makes sense. This particular alley possesses a distinctly antique atmosphere. The weathered stone walls and aged buildings create a feeling of timelessness. As she walks through it, a strange feeling settles over her. Although she is visiting this place for the first time, it somehow feels familiar. The sensation is difficult to explain. It almost feels as though she has returned to somewhere she once knew long ago. The nostalgia is so strong that she momentarily forgets she is in an entirely different world. A short distance later, a beautiful building catches her eye. Its exterior is elegant and charming, making it stand out from the surrounding structures. Risa immediately expresses her admiration. Basil studies the building and suggests that it might be some kind of store. Looking through the windows, Risa notices tables arranged inside. Based on that observation, she assumes it could be an eatery. Before Basil can answer, a voice suddenly speaks from behind them. The voice corrects her assumption and explains that the building is actually a bar. Surprised, Risa turns around and finds a woman standing nearby. The woman explains that the bar has been closed for quite some time. According to her, the establishment used to be very successful. Unfortunately, the manager eventually became ill, and the business was forced to shut down. Risa asks whether the woman lives nearby. The woman confirms that she does. She then introduces herself while pointing toward a neighboring workshop. The workshop belongs to Silas and specializes in magical tools. As for herself, she jokingly refers to herself as the store's eye candy. Her name is Angelica. With a bright smile, she explains that the workshop accepts all kinds of requests, ranging from simple repairs to creating magical tools from scratch. She encourages Risa to stop by whenever she has the opportunity. However, Angelica appears busy. After introducing herself, she quickly excuses herself and waves goodbye before heading off down the street. Risa waves back. As Angelica disappears from sight, Risa finds herself wondering whether magical tool workshops also create cookware. After all, as someone who enjoys cooking, kitchen equipment immediately captures her interest. Basil comments that Angelica seems like a very friendly person. Risa agrees. The encounter leaves a pleasant impression on her. The two continue strolling through town. As time passes, Risa gradually begins feeling thirsty from all the walking. While looking around, Basil notices a small drink stand. According to a nearby sign, drinks cost 3 ril each. Risa quickly converts the value in her head and estimates that the price is roughly equivalent to 100 yen. The drink itself looks refreshing. Without thinking much about it, she decides to buy one. The colorful beverage appears delicious. Unfortunately, appearances prove deceiving. The moment she takes a sip, her expression freezes. The flavor is unlike anything she expected. To her, it tastes like grapefruit juice mixed together with natto. The bizarre combination nearly overwhelms her. Still trying to process the experience, she absent-mindedly turns around. At that exact moment, she collides with someone. The impact causes the drink to spill forward. The liquid splashes directly onto the unfortunate victim. Risa immediately panics. She hurriedly apologizes and asks whether he is all right. The man remains silent. For several moments, he simply looks at her. Meanwhile, Basil watches the situation unfold. Standing so close to the stranger, Risa suddenly notices something. The man is remarkably handsome. His appearance catches her completely off guard. Then her attention shifts downward. She sees the spilled drink soaking into his clothing. Horror immediately replaces admiration. The strange grapefruit natto beverage is now all over him. To make matters worse, his clothing appears to be some sort of official uniform. Risa becomes even more distressed. She repeatedly apologizes and insists that she will pay for the cleaning. Surely a city this advanced must have cleaning services. Although she does not know the cost, she begins searching through her belongings, determined to compensate him somehow. The man finally speaks. Calmly, he says that the accident was just as much his fault as hers. He asks her not to trouble herself over it. Risa refuses to let the matter go so easily. Since she cannot allow herself to walk away without doing something, she quickly reaches into her bag and produces a small package. She offers it to him. The man looks confused and asks what it contains. Risa explains that they are cookies. She admits that they are probably not enough to properly compensate him for the accident, but she hopes he will at least accept them as an apology. After handing over the package, she bows deeply. The man watches her silently. Internally, he concludes that she is a rather strange person. After Risa leaves, he opens the package and examines its contents. Looking at the unfamiliar treats, he wonders what exactly cookies are. The story then shifts back to the Claude mansion later that evening. Dinner is underway. As everyone sits around the table, Tasia happily comments that today's meal is excellent once again. Guilford enthusiastically agrees. In particular, he praises the bread. The soft texture is unlike anything he has experienced before. Risa feels relieved hearing their reaction. Knowing that her efforts are appreciated brings her genuine happiness. As the conversation continues, Guilford remembers something. He asks whether she enjoyed her stroll through town earlier that day. Risa confirms that she did. She explains that she visited many different shops and spent time observing the city. The outing also gave her an opportunity to think seriously about her future. As a result, she reveals that she has started considering finding a job. The statement immediately surprises both Guilford and Tasia. They stare at her in shock. Work? Neither of them expected that answer. Guilford points out that she is already helping in the mansion kitchen. If payment is the issue, they would be more than willing to compensate her for her work. However, Risa shakes her head. She explains that money is not the reason. The Claude family has already done so much for her. They rescued her, gave her a place to stay, provided food, clothing, and emotional support. For this reason, she cannot bring herself to accept payment from them. She wants to become independent. More importantly, she wants to build a life for herself in this world. Risa admits that she is no longer afraid of California. At first everything was terrifying and unfamiliar. Now, however, she genuinely wants to live peacefully here. And that change is entirely thanks to the kindness shown to her by Guilford, Tasia, Basil, and everyone else in the Claude household. Hearing those words, the couple falls silent for a moment. Watching Risa speak with such determination, they realize that the frightened girl who arrived from another world has already begun taking her first steps toward creating a new home in California. The conversation at the dinner table continues after Risa explains that she wants to find work for herself. She calmly states that this is precisely why she wants to discover something she can do with her own abilities. The Claude family has already given her a place to stay, protected her when she was vulnerable, and treated her with incredible kindness ever since she arrived in California. For this reason, she wants to stand on her own feet rather than continue relying entirely on their generosity. Tasia listens attentively before smiling warmly. She tells Risa that if this is truly how she feels, then the entire family will support her however they can. Guilford immediately becomes interested and asks whether she already has a particular profession in mind. After considering the question, Risa explains that in her previous world she worked as an office employee. However, she is still studying the written language of California and cannot yet read or write fluently enough to handle office work. Therefore, she believes that something related to food would be the most realistic option. The moment she mentions cooking, Guilford practically jumps from his seat with excitement. According to him, the idea is excellent. The meals she prepares are unlike anything people in this world have ever encountered. Not only are they novel, but they are consistently delicious as well. In his opinion, they would certainly become popular. Tasia immediately agrees. She happily declares that if Risa opens a restaurant or cafe, she and Guilford will become regular customers and visit every day. Risa is completely caught off guard by their enthusiastic reaction. Awkwardly, she asks whether they are really talking about her opening an actual store. Guilford appears surprised that she would even question it. To him, it seems like the most natural conclusion possible. However, after a moment, he points out a serious obstacle: opening a business requires official paperwork. Unfortunately, Risa has no legal identity within California. She possesses no family registry, no citizenship records, and no documentation whatsoever. From an administrative standpoint, she technically does not exist. The problem appears rather significant. Then Tasia casually remarks that perhaps it is not actually a problem at all. She adds that everything depends on whether Risa herself would be comfortable with the solution they have in mind. The following day, Risa finds herself standing awkwardly before the household staff without understanding why everyone has gathered. Tasia suddenly steps forward and proudly gestures toward her. With a bright smile, she formally introduces Risa as her adopted daughter and asks everyone to welcome Risa Kurikawa Claude into the family. The announcement leaves Risa completely speechless. She stands frozen in place, unable to process what has just happened. Embarrassed and overwhelmed, she protests that the gesture feels far too generous. Guilford immediately reassures her. According to him, there is absolutely nothing to worry about. Around them, the maids begin applauding enthusiastically. Many of them appear genuinely delighted by the announcement. Guilford explains that he and Tasia never had children of their own. For this reason, they would be happy if Risa accepted them as her second family. The sincerity in their words deeply moves her. Her eyes begin to glisten with emotion. Ever since arriving in this world, she has repeatedly been shown kindness she never expected. Unable to express her gratitude properly, she bows deeply before them. She tells them that if they truly do not mind accepting someone as ordinary and rough around the edges as herself, then she will humbly place herself in their care. The maids immediately begin whispering among themselves. To several of them, the wording sounds suspiciously similar to a bride greeting her new family after marriage. The comparison only makes Risa even more embarrassed. From that point onward, events begin progressing at an unbelievable pace. Through the influence and connections of House Claude, legal procedures that should have taken months are resolved with remarkable efficiency. Before she fully understands what is happening, Risa officially becomes a legal resident of California. Soon afterward, she somehow finds herself becoming the owner of a future business as well. The next scene introduces another important figure. A cheerful man warmly greets her and declares that he is delighted to finally meet his adorable new niece. Standing nearby, Tasia happily greets him as her older brother, Alec. Alec admits that he was quite surprised when he learned that Tasia and Guilford had suddenly adopted a daughter. After introducing himself properly, he shakes Risa's hand and welcomes her to the family. The conversation quickly turns toward her plans for the future store. Alec asks whether she already has a specific location in mind. After thinking for a moment, Risa recalls the beautiful building she discovered while exploring the old district. She explains that there was a lovely former bar located in a nostalgic alley branching away from the central square. According to what she heard, the establishment used to be successful before eventually closing. Alec simply nods. After a brief pause, he casually suggests using that building. The immediate response completely confuses Risa. She wonders whether major decisions are always made so quickly in powerful families. Seeing her bewildered expression, Tasia explains that Alec is the head of the Ashley Company. His company handles numerous industries ranging from food distribution to real estate. Acquiring a vacant building is a relatively simple matter for someone with his resources. The discussion continues. Tasia mentions that Alec can likely help acquire ingredients as well. The moment Risa hears the word ingredients, her attention sharpens. There is one ingredient she has desperately wanted ever since arriving in this world. Gathering her courage, she asks whether it would be possible to obtain rice. Alec immediately looks surprised. He asks whether she is referring to the grain normally used as cattle feed. Risa eagerly confirms it. If possible, she would love to have some. Alec casually replies that obtaining it should not be difficult. The moment she hears those words, Risa nearly leaps from her seat. Rice! At long last, she might finally have rice. The excitement is so overwhelming that she can barely contain herself. Turning toward Tasia, she practically celebrates the news. Tasia smiles at her reaction, although she openly admits that she does not fully understand why rice is such an important discovery. Alec, however, becomes increasingly interested. The idea that people from another world regularly eat something used as livestock feed fascinates him. He admits that he would love to learn more about otherworldly cuisine. Then he proposes a business arrangement. If Risa's cooking becomes popular, perhaps she would be willing to sell him a few recipes. Risa hesitates. It is still difficult for her to imagine her cooking becoming famous. Alec responds with a confident smile. Success depends entirely upon her own abilities. However, nobody achieves anything if they are too afraid to take risks. The important thing is to challenge oneself. Listening to those words causes Risa's eyes to sparkle with determination. She enthusiastically promises to do her best. From that moment onward, the support of the Ashley Company begins pushing the project forward. Construction, renovations, permits, furniture, equipment, ingredients, and staffing all progress with astonishing speed. Everything comes together so smoothly that it almost feels unreal. Before long, a beautiful cafe stands ready for its grand opening. Looking at the completed building, Risa can hardly believe how quickly everything happened. Several weeks seem to pass within only a handful of panels. She reflects on the process. She genuinely loves cooking, so opening a cafe is a dream come true. Normally she would find the speed of these developments suspicious, yet strangely, she no longer feels surprised. Instead, she remembers something Guilford once told her: everything has a meaning. Standing beside her, Basil asks whether she is thinking about the will of the goddess. Risa nods. The phrase has remained in her thoughts ever since arriving in this world. However, one question continues bothering her. If the goddess went through the trouble of bringing her here, why has she never appeared personally? Why remain hidden after changing someone's life so dramatically? Basil explains that such a meeting is impossible. The goddess is the creator of the world itself. She resides within the land of gods, a realm completely beyond the reach of ordinary people. No human can simply visit her. Then Basil smiles warmly. According to the spirit, there is no reason to worry about such things. The goddess judged Risa to be indispensable to this world. That is why she was brought here. Risa immediately asks for a more specific explanation. What exactly is she supposed to accomplish? What role is she expected to fulfill? Basil's answer is surprisingly simple. She explains that Risa is free to do whatever she wants. That freedom itself is part of the goddess's will. The response leaves Risa staring blankly. She repeats the statement in disbelief. Do whatever she wants? Internally, she concludes that the goddess gives incredibly vague and relaxed instruction. If that is truly the divine plan, then perhaps she should respond with an equally relaxed approach. Rather than worrying endlessly about destiny, prophecies, or grand missions, she decides to focus on the things she enjoys. For now, there is one thing she wants to make more than anything else: onigiri, simple rice balls from her homeland. With that decision made, she turns her attention toward the future. On that very day, her new establishment officially stands ready to welcome customers. The sign hanging above the entrance proudly displays its name, a name inspired by the food she misses most from Japan. Thus, Risa's Cafe opens its doors under the name Cafe Omusubai, marking the beginning of a brand new chapter in her life within the world of California. The story briefly recaps Risa's journey up to this point. Protected by the goddess and watched over by spirits, she now lives in a wondrous world blessed with magic. A little more than 2 months have passed since she was suddenly brought from Japan to California. When she first arrived, she expected many difficulties. What she never expected, however, was that her greatest challenge would be the food. To Risa, the cuisine of this world was shockingly unpleasant. The bread was hard enough to break teeth, the soups were overly salty, the salads floated in excessive oil, and many dishes contained ingredients whose identities remained a complete mystery. Fortunately, she only voiced those opinions in front of the Claude family. Later, she learned that the people of this world genuinely enjoyed those foods. Their tastes were simply different from hers. Furthermore, the concept of sweets barely existed in California. Once she realized that fact, an idea naturally formed in her mind. When she began thinking about what she wanted to do in this new world, she decided to turn her greatest hobby into her profession, cooking. Thus, after receiving support from the Claude family and the Ashley Company, she opened her own cafe in another world. The story then shifts to the grand opening day of Cafe Omusubai. Not long after opening, familiar faces arrive. Guilford and Tasia step through the entrance together. Both immediately offer their congratulations. They explain that they came as soon as they heard the cafe was finally opening. Risa thanks them sincerely and happily points out that they are officially her first customers. Guilford proudly reveals that they had actually been secretly waiting outside before opening hours. According to him, they were determined to be first in line. Then he casually mentions that there had been a bug on Risa's back earlier. The comment completely ruins the dramatic atmosphere. Trying not to laugh, Risa hands them the menu. The lunch menu currently consists of several set meals. Each set includes soup and salad, while an additional 2 reel allows customers to add a drink. Guilford studies the menu carefully before deciding on the omurice set accompanied by the cafe's original blended tea. Meanwhile, Tasia selects an egg and vegetable sandwich set. Risa happily accepts their orders. As she writes everything down, she feels both grateful and embarrassed. Although they could easily eat at the Claude mansion, they deliberately traveled all the way here simply to support her. After politely informing them that their meals will be served shortly, she heads back toward the kitchen. Internally, she reflects that the feeling resembles a special day when parents come to support their child. Inside the kitchen, she immediately begins preparing the orders. For omurice, speed is everything. She carefully spreads the eggs into a thin layer before placing seasoned rice and chicken inside. Technically, the meat is not chicken but meat from the local Toto bird. Even so, the result closely resembles the dish she remembers from Japan. Working quickly, she rolls the omelet into shape. The soup is already warm. Only the sandwich remains. Before long, everything is ready. This is the first time she has ever served customers in her own cafe. Balancing the dishes carefully, she walks back to the dining area and proudly announces that their order is ready. Guilford and Tasia immediately praise her. According to them, she already looks like a professional cafe owner. Tasia also proudly points out the uniform. After all, she personally designed and made it. While they are enjoying the meals, another customer appears. A woman's voice comes from the takeaway window. Risa quickly welcomes her. The customer explains that she would like to purchase a loaf of bread similar to the one displayed in the window. Risa politely asks whether she would prefer bread rolls or plain bread. The woman calmly answers that she would like 10 of each. She also requests that everything be placed into a basket she brought with her. Risa agrees and calculates the total. As she prepares the order, something catches her attention. Outside waits a luxurious carriage. Judging from its appearance, it clearly belongs to someone important. The woman purchasing the bread is probably an attendant. After receiving the basket, the woman thanks Risa and returns to the carriage. Watching her leave, Risa becomes increasingly curious. Back inside, Guilford asks whether the takeaway window is currently used only for bread and cookies. Risa confirms that it is. At that moment, Tasia happens to glance outside. She suddenly realizes something. The woman who purchased the bread belongs to Adele's household. Curious, Risa asks whether Tasia knows her. Tasia explains that Adele is actually her childhood friend and also Guilford's cousin. Recently, she had been enthusiastically bragging about Risa's bread. Apparently, Adele became interested enough to send someone to investigate personally. Hearing this, Risa becomes pleased. However, the conversation does not end there. Tasia casually reveals Adele's true identity. She is the queen of the country. Risa's eyes immediately widen. The revelation leaves her speechless. Tasia quickly adds that Adele is actually very easygoing and approachable. However, appearing casually in public is difficult for someone of her position. For this reason, she did not introduce herself personally. As the information sinks in, Risa cannot help thinking that the Claude family is connected to royalty itself. The more she learns about them, the more incredible her adopted family appears. Unfortunately, on the very first day of Café au Musabi, she completely overlooks the significance of what just happened. The consequences arrive the following morning. Before the cafe even properly opens, a crowd has already formed outside. People gather around the takeaway window. Some ask about bread. Others inquire about cookies. Many simply want to know whether products are still available. Risa stares at the crowd in confusion. She wonders why so many people have arrived so early. At first, she suspects Tasia might have been advertising again. Then a familiar neighbor appears. The woman explains that a rumor has spread throughout the shopping district. After all, everyone noticed the royal carriage parked in a narrow alleyway yesterday. That alone attracted attention. The royal crest displayed on the carriage removed any remaining doubt. Now the entire district believes that bread from Café au Musabi is supplied directly to royalty. The moment Risa hears this explanation, she finally understands. The crowd is not here by coincidence. The rumor itself has become the best advertisement imaginable. The neighbor quickly adds that the bread is genuinely delicious regardless of the rumors. Even without royal attention, she believes people would have eventually discovered it. Nevertheless, the influence of the royal family proves terrifyingly effective. Every morning the bread sells out. Then it sells out again the next day. And again the day after that. Demand continues growing at an incredible pace. Meanwhile, the Ashley company begins distributing the bread recipe commercially. Their sales steadily increase as well. Under normal circumstances, such success would be wonderful. Unfortunately, it creates a different problem. One day, Risa suddenly realizes what is happening. Looking around the cafe, she loudly points out that the establishment is gradually turning into a bakery rather than a cafe. Basil fails to see the problem. According to the spirit, selling products is a good thing. Risa agrees in principle. The issue is what happens afterward. Customers rush in during the morning and buy all the bread. Then they leave. Once the bread is sold out, the cafe becomes completely empty. Basil explains that people in California rarely sit down to eat unless alcohol is involved. The local dining culture is very different from Japan's. Risa groans. She is already struggling to keep up with baking enough bread. Managing table service at the same time feels nearly impossible. Just then, the door opens. A familiar man enters. He politely asks whether the cafe sells cookies. Risa immediately apologizes. Unfortunately, all cookies are already sold out for the day. Only after answering does she properly look at the customer. Then she freezes. It is the handsome man she accidentally spilled the strange grapefruit and out-of-flavored drink on weeks earlier. The same man she gave cookies to as an apology. The man appears slightly disappointed. He explains that he expected the cookies to be sold out. Recently, he noticed someone eating them at work. When he learned they came from this cafe, he decided to visit and purchase more. Unfortunately, his timing was poor. Risa becomes pleasantly surprised. Apparently, the cookies made a strong impression. Curious, she asks whether he actually liked them. The man begins describing the experience in a remarkably analytical manner. According to him, the cookies were unlike anything he had ever eaten before. They were hard, yet strangely airy, sweet and fragrant. The flavor remained interesting no matter how many he ate. Eventually, he concluded that the correct word for the experience was tasty. Listening to the detailed explanation, Risa cannot help feeling amused. The man sounds less like a customer and more like a professional food critic. She begins wondering whether he secretly has a sweet tooth. Curious, she directly asks whether he likes sweets. The man honestly admits that he has not eaten enough sweets to determine whether he likes them or not. His answer makes Risa think for a moment. Then an idea appears. Since the cafe is currently empty anyway, perhaps this is a good opportunity. She invites him inside and prepares a plate containing a new experimental product. Placing it before him, she explains that it is a trial item called a scone. She asks whether he would mind giving her some feedback. The man seems surprised by the request. He asks whether it is really acceptable. Risa explains that there are no customers at the moment. For this reason, she would greatly appreciate an honest opinion. The man eventually agrees. He picks up the scone and begins examining it carefully before taking a bite. As Risa watches, another thought crosses her mind. No matter what he is doing, whether standing silently, analyzing food, or simply breaking apart a pastry, the man somehow manages to look incredibly handsome. The realization annoys her slightly. At the same time, she cannot deny that it is true. After carefully tasting the scone, Zeke gives his honest opinion. He explains that it is not quite as sweet as the cookies she previously gave him, yet he likes it very much. In his view, it is enjoyable in a completely different way. The texture is pleasant, the flavor is balanced, and for some reason the topping especially catches his attention. He remarks that it pairs remarkably well with tea. Risa is pleased to hear such detailed feedback. She explains that the white topping is whipped cream while the red topping is fruit jam. Curious about his preferences, she asks which version he likes better. Zeke thinks about the question for a moment before answering. According to him, both are delicious. However, if he absolutely must choose, he prefers the whipped cream version slightly more. The answer immediately makes Risa smile. She admits that she prefers the cream version as well. For a brief moment, the conversation becomes surprisingly casual and comfortable. Then she suddenly realizes that she has been speaking far too informally with a customer. Embarrassed by her own behavior, she quickly apologizes. Zeke, however, appears completely unconcerned. He calmly explains that he does not mind at all. After all, he believes they are approximately the same age. According to him, it has already been 2 years since he came of age. Risa is about to agree when Basil suddenly interrupts. The spirit casually points out that in California, people are considered adults at 16 years old. The information instantly causes Risa to freeze. Then she blurts out her reaction without thinking. A minor. There is no way. Zeke immediately protests. He insists that he is legally an adult. Risa refuses to accept that argument. From her perspective, he is unquestionably a proper minor. Not only that, but he is 4 years younger than she is. The realization completely changes how she views him. Zeke appears slightly embarrassed. After learning that she is older, he politely apologizes for speaking so casually. Risa quickly waves away the concern. She explains that she probably looks younger than she really is, especially when compared to people from this world. The statement causes Zeke to become curious. When he asks what she means, Risa casually explains that she only arrived here recently. For this reason, she has not had many opportunities to make friends yet. Then she smiles. She admits that she genuinely enjoyed talking with him and thanks him for putting up with her somewhat selfish requests and strange experiments. Zeke falls silent for a moment. Then he finally introduces himself properly. His name is Zeke Brown. He serves in the city's chivalric order and works as a knight responsible for protecting the city and maintaining order. Before leaving, he mentions that he intends to return the following day after finishing his patrol duties. This time, he plans to buy cookies before they sell out. The moment Risa hears that, her eyes immediately light up. The idea of having a returning customer makes her unexpectedly happy. She enthusiastically promises that she will bake extra cookies specifically so that he will not be disappointed again. The conversation continues for a little while longer. Eventually, Zeke prepares to leave. Before he goes, Risa formally introduces herself as the manager of Cafe Omusabai and tells him that she will be waiting for his next visit. The following day arrives. As usual, the cafe opens early. Customers gather around the takeaway window. Fresh bread sells rapidly. Cookies disappear one batch after another. The morning rush unfolds exactly as it always does. However, throughout the entire day, Risa repeatedly finds herself glancing toward the entrance. Every time the door opens, she instinctively wonders whether Zeke has arrived. Hours pass. Customers come and go. The afternoon fades into evening. Yet Zeke never appears. By nighttime, the extra cookies she prepared for him remain untouched. Basil eventually notices. The spirit points out that Zeke specifically said he would come back, yet he never showed up. Risa quickly insists that she is not bothered. After all, cookies have a long shelf life. Nothing will go to waste. Besides, working hours are not technically over yet. She knows very little about the daily responsibilities of knights. Perhaps something unexpected happened during patrol. Maybe he simply had a particularly busy day. For this reason, she decides not to think too much about it. Just as she finishes speaking, a knock sounds at the door. The noise immediately catches her attention. Without realizing it, she becomes excited. For an instant, she genuinely believes that Zeke has finally arrived. She quickly hurries toward the entrance. A greeting is already forming on her lips. However, the moment she opens the door, her expectations are completely shattered. Standing outside is not Zeke. Instead, a heavily intoxicated man sways unsteadily in front of the cafe. The smell of alcohol is strong enough to notice immediately. His face is red, his movements are unstable, and his eyes lack focus. The man stares at her for a moment before asking who she is. An uneasy feeling immediately settles in Risa's chest. Instinctively, she begins backing away. Unfortunately, the drunk man interprets this as permission to enter. He stumbles forward into the cafe. Then he loudly demands wine. Risa becomes increasingly nervous. The man is already visibly drunk. Why is he asking for more alcohol? Trying to remain polite, she explains that Cafe Omusabai is not a bar. They do not serve wine or any other alcoholic beverages. She respectfully asks him to leave. The response instantly changes the man's mood. His expression twists with anger. He loudly demands to know whether she is refusing him. Before Risa can react, he suddenly swings the bottle he is holding. The bottle flies directly toward her. A frightened scream escapes her lips. At that exact moment, Basil acts. The spirit unleashes a burst of wind. The attack is thrown off course. Risa desperately tries to avoid it. She spins away from the incoming bottle. Although she avoids a direct hit, she loses her balance in the process. Her head crashes painfully against the edge of a nearby table. The impact sends a sharp jolt through her body. For a moment, stars seem to flash before her eyes. Basil immediately rushes to her side. The spirit anxiously asks whether she is all right. Still holding her head, Risa assures Basil that she is fine. She also thanks her. Without Basil's wind, the bottle might have struck her directly. Unfortunately, the danger is far from over. The drunk man has not calmed down. If anything, he appears even angrier than before. He continues advancing toward her. Each unsteady step feels threatening. Watching him approach, Risa's fear grows rapidly. Her mind desperately searches for a solution. She knows she needs to run. She understands that remaining here is dangerous, yet her body refuses to cooperate. Her legs shake uncontrollably. The fear is so overwhelming that she cannot move. Her thoughts become a confused blur. As the drunken stranger closes the distance between them, panic completely takes over. With nowhere else to turn, Risa finally does the only thing she can think of. Gathering every bit of strength she has, she cries out for help. On the other side of the city, before any of the trouble at Cafe Omusabai begins, Zeke finds himself thinking about Risa once again. While sitting alone at a small restaurant during a break from his duties, he looks down at the meal placed before him. His thoughts drift back to the strange young woman who gave him unfamiliar food as an apology after accidentally splashing a drink onto his uniform. He remembers how concerned she had been about staining the fabric. Looking down at his uniform now, he thinks that even if the cookies had left marks, he could simply have washed them when he returned home. The memory causes him to shake his head slightly. A fellow knight notices him eating alone and approaches his table. The coworker remarks that it is admirable how seriously Zeke takes his work, but he should be careful not to overexert himself. Zeke acknowledges the advice while continuing to stare at the meal in front of him. In his mind, he admits that he has grown tired of eating the same dishes every day. Until recently, he always believed that food existed merely to satisfy hunger and provide energy for work. However, after tasting the cookies made by Risa, something begins to change. For the first time, he starts looking forward to meals. The memory of unfamiliar flavors lingers in his mind far longer than expected. Before he can think further about it, a report arrives regarding a drunken man causing disturbances throughout the city. Zeke immediately leaves to investigate. Following the reports through several streets, he eventually tracks the troublemaker to the old district. By the time he arrives at Cafe Omusubai, the situation has already become dangerous. The drunken man is advancing toward Risa. Fear is clearly visible on her face. Without hesitation, Zeke steps forward and grabs the man's arm just as he prepares to strike again. His voice rings through the room as he firmly orders the man to stop. The sight immediately fills both Risa and Basil with relief. The drunk man, however, only becomes more enraged. Demanding to know who Zeke is, he struggles violently. Zeke calmly twists his arm and uses his momentum against him. The drunkard instantly loses balance and crashes onto the floor. Only then does Zeke explain that he received reports concerning a man disturbing public order. When he arrived at the original location, the culprit had already escaped. For this reason, he spent time searching the surrounding neighborhood. Never did he expect the chase to end at Cafe Omusubai. After ensuring the danger has passed, he immediately turns toward Risa. His expression softens noticeably. He apologizes for arriving late and asks whether she is injured. Still shaken by the encounter, Risa awkwardly assures him that she is fine. Meanwhile, the defeated drunkard loudly declares that he gives up. At that exact moment, the cafe door swings open. Another knight rushes inside. Completely out of breath, he asks whether Zeke has already caught the culprit. Zeke casually comments that his partner's footsteps are simply too short. The exhausted knight immediately protests. His name is Reinhardt. Although irritated, he quickly accepts the situation. Zeke orders Reinhardt to escort the culprit away. Reinhardt then asks what Zeke intends to do. Zeke simply explains that the victim is an acquaintance. The answer surprises Reinhardt. An acquaintance who works at a small eatery is certainly not someone he expected Zeke to know. Even so, he nods and drags the drunken man away. Soon the cafe becomes quiet once more. Zeke walks over to Risa and extends his hand. He asks whether she can stand. Risa hesitates briefly before accepting his help. As their hands meet, both of them pause for a moment. Their eyes briefly lock. The atmosphere feels strangely gentle compared to the chaos only moments earlier. After helping her sit down, Zeke joins her at a nearby table. Risa explains that the building originally operated as a bar. For this reason, she assumes the drunk man was probably a former regular customer who still associated the establishment with alcohol. As the conversation settles, another concern enters her mind. She asks what will happen to the man. Zeke explains that he will most likely receive punishment. Ordinarily, such incidents result in a fine. However, if the victim decides to file a formal complaint, the sentence could become considerably more severe. He asks whether she intends to pursue legal action. Risa immediately refuses. According to her, if the man sincerely regrets his actions, that is sufficient. Aside from frightening her, he did not cause any major injury. The answer surprises Zeke. He remarks that if the injured party wishes to forgive the offender, then the authorities generally accept that decision. Nevertheless, he reminds her that she should be more careful. Even though public order in the capital is relatively good, running a store alone still carries risks. Risa bows apologetically. She admits that he is right. Zeke quickly clarifies that he did not mean to sound as though he were scolding her. Risa laughs awkwardly. She admits that she had become somewhat careless. When she lived alone in Tokyo, she used to be much more cautious. The mention of Tokyo causes Zeke to become thoughtful. After a brief silence, he asks about her family. The question causes Risa to hesitate. Eventually, she explains that she currently lives with the Claude family. Zeke immediately recognizes the name. He asks whether she means Guilford Claude from the magic department. When she confirms it, he admits that he never knew Guilford had a daughter. Risa explains that Guilford is actually her adoptive father and that the adoption happened only recently. The explanation deepens Zeke's curiosity. He then asks when she first arrived in California. Risa answers that it was only a short time ago. The response causes Zeke's expression to sharpen. He explains that around that same period, the chivalric order witnessed a mysterious light in the sky. The phenomenon was unusual enough to warrant an official report to the magic department. Since Guilford Claude serves as the kingdom's foremost royal magician, he was likely among the first individuals sent to investigate. Carefully, Zeke asks whether Risa has any connection to that incident. The question catches her completely off guard. For a moment, she freezes. Then she suddenly smiles. Instead of answering directly, she asks whether he would like another cup of tea. The abrupt change of topic leaves Zeke confused. Risa explains that the story is somewhat lengthy. If he has time, she would like him to hear everything from the beginning. After receiving his agreement, she slowly begins speaking. She explains that her real family is incredibly ordinary. There is nothing particularly remarkable about them. She is born as the youngest of 4 siblings in a rural town located between the coastline and the mountains. The family lives close to nature and relies heavily on what they produce themselves. She tells him about her grandmother, whose words shape the entire household. The elderly woman grows up in a family of women after both her father and brother lose their lives during a war. For this reason, she develops a philosophy centered around making full use of every available resource. According to her, anything that can be used should be used, and anything that can be made should be made by one's own hands. Those teachings become the foundation of the family lifestyle. Their home possesses vegetable gardens, rice fields, and even a mountain plot where various crops can be grown or gathered. Fresh vegetables are always available. Rice appears at nearly every meal. Homemade miso and soy sauce are common parts of daily life. From childhood onward, Risa learns not only how ingredients are grown but also how they are transformed into food. Her father constantly brings home unfamiliar seeds collected from different places. He raises them, studies them carefully, and experiments with cultivation methods. Whenever a new ingredient succeeds, he also researches ways to cook it. As a result, Risa grows up surrounded by food and the process of creating it. Then she begins talking about one of her more traumatic childhood memories. At one point, her father decides to raise poultry. For a young child, watching chickens being slaughtered is terrifying. She vividly remembers seeing blood dripping from birds hanging outside beneath a tree. The sight frightens her so much that it nearly becomes a childhood trauma. Yet despite those memories, she still enjoys eating the dishes prepared from the chickens afterward. She especially remembers carriage. The contradiction makes her laugh awkwardly. According to her, the truly frightening part is how people gradually become accustomed to such things. Life continues, meals continue, and eventually what once seemed shocking becomes normal. As she reflects upon those memories, she concludes that growing up in such a self-sufficient environment benefits her greatly. Because she learns how food is cultivated, processed, preserved, and cooked, she is able to adapt surprisingly well even after arriving in an unfamiliar place. Listening carefully to her story, Zeke suddenly focuses on a particular phrase. His eyes widen. Then he repeats the words in disbelief, an unknown world. The realization visibly shocks him as he begins to understand that Risa's story may be far stranger than he originally imagined. After a brief silence, Risa finally decides that there is no point avoiding the question any longer. Since Zeke has already connected her arrival to the mysterious light seen over the capital, she feels that he deserves an honest answer. Gathering her courage, she reveals the truth. She explains that she comes from an entirely different world. According to her, she is brought to California through a summoning carried out by the goddess. She adds that describing it as a summoning is actually being generous. In her opinion, being dragged into another world without permission feels far more selfish on the goddess's part than anything else. To her surprise, Zeke does not laugh. He does not accuse her of making up stories. Instead, he remains calm. Risa explains that Basil, the spirit floating beside her, can confirm everything she says. She points toward the small spirit and asks whether Zeke can see her. Zeke shakes his head. Unfortunately, he cannot. Risa nods in understanding. She remarks that it is a shame. If you were able to see spirits, Basil could have supported her story and made it sound slightly less unbelievable. Zeke's response catches her off guard. According to him, he does not think she is lying. She simply does not look like the kind of person who would fabricate something so outrageous. The straightforward compliment immediately makes Risa blush. A small smile appears on her face. She thanks him quietly. The conversation then shifts toward her former life. As she stares into her teacup, her thoughts drift far away. She begins wondering how her family is doing now. She wonders whether her grandmother is still healthy. She wonders whether the fields back home have become damaged by salt from the sea. She wonders whether her father still has any hair left after years of stress and hard work. She wonders whether her mother remains the same carefree and absent-minded woman she always was. She wonders whether her older brother and sister are happy in their marriages. She even wonders whether her youngest older brother finally managed to find a stable job. As she lists these thoughts one after another, both Basil and Zeke become increasingly concerned. The realization eventually reaches its most painful conclusion. Risa quietly remarks that she will probably never know the answers. After all, she will never see any of them again. The statement causes the atmosphere to become heavy. Zeke comments that such a situation sounds incredibly heartbreaking. Risa immediately denies it. She insists that she is fine. The people of this world have been remarkably kind to her. Everything has gone surprisingly smoothly since her arrival. Well, almost everything. The food situation is another matter entirely. The joke earns a small smile from both Basil and Zeke. Risa continues speaking. According to her, she was never particularly attached to returning home in the first place. Her family values independence above all else. They are the type of people who avoid interfering in one another's lives unless absolutely necessary. Even if she suddenly disappeared, she believes they would continue living happily. She has no doubt about that. For this reason, she tries not to think about her previous world too often. However, tonight's incident changes something. When the drunken man attacks her, she suddenly realizes that she could actually die in this world. In that moment, she unexpectedly finds herself wishing she could eat her mother's cooking one more time. The memory feels painfully vivid, yet there is no point dwelling on impossible wishes. What is gone is gone. Zeke quietly calls her name. The concern in his voice makes her realize she has revealed far more than intended. Embarrassed, she immediately apologizes. She explains that she must still be shaken from the attack. Then she quickly changes the subject. According to her, there are still ingredients left out in the kitchen that need to be cleaned up. She tells him to wait a little longer and promises to bring him the cookies afterward. Just as she prepares to stand, something unexpected happens. Zeke suddenly rises from his chair. His hand lands firmly on the table. The sharp sound startles everyone. Then he tells her to wait. Rather than letting her handle everything alone, he insists on helping. According to him, helping people is part of his duty. For this reason, she should stop trying to carry everything by herself. The sincerity behind those words catches Risa completely off guard. For a moment, she cannot answer. She simply turns her face away. Basil immediately notices the expression she is making. The little spirit flies closer and softly calls out to her. Risa smiles. She thanks Basil. Then, in a voice only slightly above a whisper, she admits that she does not really feel lonely. There are kind people in this world too. People like Basil. People like Zeke. A little while later, the atmosphere becomes much lighter. Since Zeke insists on helping, Risa eventually puts him to work. She hands him a large bag of flour. Zeke examines it curiously. To him, it appears to be ordinary wheat flour. Risa confirms that it is. Both the cookies and the scones are made using the same basic ingredient. The revelation surprises him. He admits that he imagined her recipes required exotic or magical materials. Instead, she explains that cooking is often about combining ordinary ingredients in the right way. The idea fascinates him. Food is such a natural part of daily life that he never really thinks about how it is created. Curious, Risa asks whether he cooks often. Zeke immediately shakes his head. He explains that the chivalric order operates its own cafeteria. Knights spend their days training and performing physically demanding duties. As a result, meals are treated primarily as fuel. Recruits even have limited dining times. There is rarely an opportunity to properly savor food. Hearing this, Risa is visibly shocked. The system sounds almost military. Zeke agrees. For most of his life, he has never cared much about cooking. Likewise, he has never cared much about eating. Food is simply a means of replenishing energy. nothing more. At least, that is what he believes until recently. Then he tastes her cooking. Everything changes. He explains that after eating her food, he discovers that meals can offer something beyond simple nutrition. There is something enjoyable about them, something comforting, something worth looking forward to. More importantly, there is something he wants to experience again. Not once, not twice, but many times. As he speaks, Risa's eyes begin sparkling. His words touch her deeply. As someone who loves cooking, hearing those thoughts means more than any compliment. Zeke continues. According to him, he never realized food could enrich life in such a way. For the first time, he genuinely understands why people enjoy cooking. Risa stares into his eyes. Then she softly says his name. When he responds, she laughs awkwardly. If he keeps saying things like that, she warns him, he is going to make her blush. She also admits that she believes good food truly enriches people's lives. The atmosphere between them grows warmer. Smiling brightly, she tells him that he is welcome to visit the cafe anytime. After all, she plans to create many new sweets in the future. Zeke nods. He says he will be looking forward to them. Then his expression suddenly becomes serious. Instead of speaking as a customer, he asks a completely unexpected question. He wants to know whether she would hire him as an employee. For a moment, Risa genuinely thinks she misheard him. The request is so sudden that her mind struggles to process it. She asks what about the chivalric order. Zeke calmly answers that he intends to resign. The response leaves her completely speechless. Resign? Just like that? She even jokingly asks whether he is so worried about crime in the city that he wants to change careers entirely. Zeke shakes his head. Although safety is important, that is not the reason. The truth is much simpler. He no longer wants to remain merely a guard. Instead, he wants to learn how to cook. He wants to create food capable of moving people the way her cooking moves him. He wants to inspire someone through dishes made by his own hands. Lowering his head, he sincerely asks her to teach him. Watching him bow so earnestly leaves Risa stunned. Only a short while earlier, she is trembling in fear after being attacked by a drunken man. Now, somehow, that fear has completely vanished. In its place is confusion, amusement, and disbelief. She wonders whether he is actually serious. After thinking it over, she admits that she is currently struggling to keep up with bread production. The cafe genuinely needs additional help. Therefore, an extra pair of hands would be useful. The moment she smiles and says so, Zeke's eyes widen with happiness. The reaction is so pure that it almost resembles a child receiving a long-awaited gift. Thus, on that special night, Risa's cooking changes the course of one young man's life. As she watches Zeke enthusiastically helping clean the cafe afterward, she cannot help thinking that the situation feels strangely familiar. Looking at the hard-working knight eagerly following her instructions, she finds herself wondering whether this is what it feels like to tame a wild animal by feeding it. The thought nearly makes her laugh as the two continue tidying up Cafe Omusubai together late into the night. Several days pass after Zeke starts working at Cafe Omusubai, and the once quiet cafe gradually becomes livelier with each passing day. Early in the morning, Risa asks whether Zeke is ready for work. She also asks whether the uniform fits him properly. However, the moment she sees him standing in the completed cafe uniform, she is left completely stunned. In her mind, she thinks that he looks less like a trainee and more like the manager of the entire establishment. The uniform fits him perfectly, and his already handsome appearance somehow becomes even more striking. To Risa, he seems to radiate the aura of an impossibly dazzling handsome man. For this reason, she finds herself becoming slightly nervous whenever she looks directly at him. Zeke politely states that he will be assisting her from that day onward and asks her to accept him as a trainee. Risa quickly agrees and says that she will be glad to work together with him. Several days after the drunkard incident, peace has fully returned to Cafe Omusubai. Risa now has a new coworker, and the two begin settling into a comfortable routine. One morning, Risa announces that it is time for the day's lesson. She explains that bread cannot be made in a single day because it requires time to rise properly. She shows Zeke the dough she prepared the previous evening. Zeke appears confused about what exactly rising means. Risa explains that it is a process called fermentation. She describes it as microorganisms working inside the dough in order to improve the final product. Immediately, Zeke becomes concerned and asks whether there are actually living microorganisms inside the bread. Risa quickly tells him not to overthink it and reassures him that they are completely harmless. She then continues the lesson, explaining each step carefully. First, the dough must be taken out and pressed down. After that, it is divided into smaller pieces. The pieces are then shaped into round portions and allowed to rest before being placed into molds for another rise. According to Risa, those 3 steps are extremely important. Once the dough is ready, it simply needs to be baked in the oven for 30 minutes. She cheerfully concludes that plain bread is surprisingly simple to make. Zeke comments that bread already exists in this world, so at least he can easily imagine the final result. Risa agrees outwardly, but in her mind she suspects that Zeke is probably imagining the infamous rock-hard bread common throughout California. When the bread finally finishes baking, however, Zeke's eyes widen in complete disbelief. He stares at the loaf and declares that it cannot possibly be bread. Risa immediately insists that it absolutely is bread. Zeke carefully touches the loaf and remarks that it is unbelievably soft. It is completely different from the bread people normally eat in this world. Risa happily explains that it is also slightly sweeter. She removes the loaf from the mold and confirms that it baked properly all the way through. Then she cuts a slice and offers it to him. After taking a bite, Zeke freezes. Risa explains that it is only homemade bread and that it could become even better with practice. However, Zeke disagrees. He points out that she was the one who developed the recipe and taught the process. In his eyes, she is an extraordinary person. Risa becomes embarrassed and tells him that he is exaggerating. According to her, bread like this is completely normal in Japan. Then she changes the subject and asks him to stop calling her manager. Zeke appears confused and asks why. Risa explains that although she may technically be his employer, she dislikes excessive formality. She tells him that there is no need to be so stiff around her and encourages him to relax. Zeke thinks carefully about her request. After a moment, he announces that he understands. Then he declares that he will call her teacher instead. Risa immediately protests and tells him to simply call her by her name. Rather than continue the argument, she excitedly announces that it is time to prepare for opening. Thus, Zeke's first official day working in the cafe begins with bread making. After that, he throws himself completely into his work. He helps peel vegetables, replenish bread displays, clean tables, serve customers, manage sales, and even water the plants outside the cafe. Yet despite all of those contributions, his greatest talent seems to be something entirely unrelated to work. Simply standing in the cafe causes a tremendous impact. Customers constantly glance toward him and wonder who the handsome young man is. Many people enter the cafe for the first time and immediately notice him. Some even whisper that the cafe has a handsome employee unlike any they have ever seen before. One afternoon, the bell above the entrance rings as 2 elegant women enter the cafe. Risa welcomes them and asks how she may help. One of the women comments that this must be the cafe Tasia has been enthusiastically talking about. The other asks whether Risa is the manager. Risa confirms that she is and realizes they must have come through Tasia's recommendation. The women explain that whenever they visit Tasia, she constantly boasts about her beloved daughter's cooking. Eventually, their curiosity became too great to ignore. Inwardly, Risa realizes that Tasia has apparently been advertising her cafe everywhere. After seating them, one of the women requests something called sweet food. Risa happily recommends the sweet set. She presents the menu and explains that today's selection includes Swiss roll and 2 varieties of scones. The customers immediately become confused. One asks what exactly a Swiss roll is. Risa explains that it is made by rolling sponge cake together with whipped cream. The women become even more confused. One asks what whipped cream might be. The other jokingly wonders whether it has something to do with kitchen sponges. Risa hurriedly clarifies that it does not. As she struggles to determine how much explanation is necessary, Zeke quietly appears beside her carrying a tray. He politely suggests that it may be easier to taste the sweets than listen to a complicated explanation. He presents samples of the Swiss roll. Risa is instantly impressed by his quick thinking. She realizes that providing samples is far more effective than lengthy description. The customers taste the sweets while Risa explains that Swiss rolls are softer and sweeter, whereas scones can be enjoyed with different toppings such as jam, honey, or whipped cream. The women become excited as they debate which combination to choose. Meanwhile, Zeke quietly returns to the kitchen without drawing attention to himself. Risa watches him leave and feels grateful for his help. After finishing their meal, the women enthusiastically praise everything they tasted. They declare that the food exceeds even Tasia's glowing descriptions and promise to return again. They also vow to recommend the cafe to their friends. Risa thanks them for visiting. Later that evening, after the customers have left, Zeke asks whether it is already closing time. Risa confirms that it is and says they still need to clean up. While cleaning, she praises him for radiating the cool presence of a former knight. She points out that customers seem reassured simply by seeing him nearby. Zeke modestly claims that his appearance is probably his only redeeming feature. Risa immediately rejects that idea. She tells him that he is so naturally talented that nobody would believe it is his first experience in customer service. She even admits that she briefly suspected he might have worked in the service industry before. Zeke firmly states that he has never done anything except serve as a knight. Then his expression becomes unusually serious. He remarks that despite all of her praise, he still feels that he cannot properly serve customers. Risa quickly reassures him that he is doing an excellent job. She explains that he naturally helps people without even realizing it. According to her, he resembles a loyal pet who instinctively looks after everyone nearby. Although the comparison is somewhat strange, Zeke appears deeply touched by the compliment. Rather than continue discussing himself, he suggests preparing for the next day. Risa agrees and begins teaching him how to make bread dough using the yeast she developed from local real fruit. The days continue passing in this fashion. People often say that understanding another person's thoughts is nearly impossible unless they are family members or childhood friends. For this reason, Risa sometimes finds Zeke difficult to understand. Whether that mystery comes from his personality or from the fact that she herself comes from another world, she cannot quite determine. Eventually, the cafe begins experiencing a noticeable increase in dine-in customers. One day, Angelica from the neighboring magic tool workshop visits and immediately notices the difference. She comments that the increase seems far too sudden to be explained naturally. Risa assumes that Tasia's recommendation started the trend and that word of mouth carried it further. However, Angelica disagrees. Looking around the cafe, she notices Zeke politely serving customers. Every order is delivered with professionalism, and every customer leaves smiling. Angelica points toward him and asks where Risa managed to find such an impressive specimen. Risa awkwardly replies that it happened mostly by chance. She explains that Zeke only started working there recently, yet he already helps with nearly everything. Angelica comments that he sounds like Mr. Perfect and guesses that his previous workplace must have hated losing him. Risa can only smile uncertainly. Before leaving, Angelica informs her that the mixer she ordered is finally ready. Risa becomes extremely excited. She thanks Angelica repeatedly and announces that she will pick it up immediately after work. Although Angelica admits she still has no idea how the strange machine functions, she is pleased that it works. After the cafe closes, Risa excitedly discusses future possibilities. She wonders whether she should make ice cream first or perhaps chiffon cake. Zeke asks whether something special happened. Risa proudly explains that her mixer is finally complete. According to her, it will make mixing ingredients vastly easier and greatly expand the variety of sweets she can create. Since tomorrow is their day off, she intends to spend the entire day experimenting. Zeke immediately asks whether he may come as well. Risa agrees, although inwardly she thinks that he seems strangely eager whenever food is involved. As they walk together, Zeke observes that she truly loves cooking. He points out that she essentially opened the cafe in order to pursue her hobby. Risa laughs and admits that there is some truth to that. Then she reveals the real reason. She explains that local food tasted so terrible to her when she first arrived that she desperately wanted something delicious to eat. The number one reason she opened Cafe Omusabai was simply her desire to enjoy good food again. Eventually, she hopes to reform California's food culture through the cafe. That dream inspired everything she has done so far. Zeke quietly tells her that she may not need to wait very long. He declares that his duty as her first disciple will be to create the first dish she genuinely enjoys that was made by someone other than herself. His words cause her eyes to sparkle. She realizes that he is serious. Smiling warmly, she tells him that she will look forward to it. After remembering that she still needs to collect the mixer, she hurries down the street. As she walks, she suddenly notices a familiar figure waiting nearby. It is Reinhard Howell, Zeke's former coworker from the chivalric order. Surprised, she asks whether he came to see Zeke. Reinhard shakes his head. With a suspiciously serious expression, he explains that he actually came to speak with her. Before Risa comes to this world, she lives the life of an ordinary working adult in Japan. There is nothing particularly unusual about her circumstances. Although she gains some experience working at a restaurant during her younger years, she never plans to make cooking her primary profession. To her, Cooking is simply an enjoyable hobby, a pleasant way to spend her free time after work. After graduating from junior college, she moves to Tokyo and begins working in the offices of various small and medium-sized companies. Her life settles into a predictable routine. Every day feels almost identical to the one before it. She goes to work, completes paperwork, attends meetings, returns home, and repeats the same process again the following day. Looking back on those years, she remembers occasionally wondering whether that was truly the life she wanted for herself. At times she feels as though she is becoming no different from a copy machine, endlessly repeating the same tasks without any real purpose beyond completing the next day of work. Ironically, after being summoned to another world, she finds herself doing something she never expected. She becomes a cook. The scene returns to the present inside Cafe Omusubai. Risa stands in the kitchen in front of the mixer she had been eagerly waiting to receive. The machine sits on the counter while she stares blankly at it. Nearby, Basil and Zeke quietly observe her. Several moments pass in complete silence. Finally, Zeke gently points out that the mixer is not actually turned on. Risa immediately blinks in surprise before realizing her mistake. Embarrassed, she lets out an awkward sound and admits that it really is not turned on. Zeke asks whether she is feeling alright. He points out that she has been acting strangely since early morning and wonders if she might simply be tired. Risa quickly assures him that she is completely fine. She explains that she was merely lost in thought and forgot to switch the machine on. However, even while speaking, she knows that is only part of the truth. Today is supposed to be her day off. She plans to test the mixer and develop new menu items for the cafe. Nevertheless, her mind keeps returning to the conversation she has with Reinhardt the previous evening. The story flashes back to that conversation. Reinhardt directly asks what sort of strange ideas she has been putting into Zeke's head. Risa is completely confused by the accusation and asks what he means. Reinhardt wonders whether Zeke told her anything. Then he begins explaining. Since their days at the Night Academy, he and Zeke endure harsh training together. As fellow comrades, he knows better than anyone how talented Zeke truly is. According to Reinhardt, Zeke possesses exceptional diligence, discipline, and natural physical ability. Virtually everyone within the chivalric order expects him to eventually become one of its future leaders. Many even believe he is destined to become the next captain. For this reason, Reinhardt cannot understand why Zeke would throw away such a promising future. He explains that even after submitting his resignation letter, Zeke stubbornly refuses to reconsider. Reinhardt says he repeatedly tries to stop him, but nothing changes Zeke's mind. Then he speaks frankly. He compares the future of a knight with a stable career and a likely promotion against the uncertain future of an employee at a small cafe that could theoretically close at any time. In Reinhardt's eyes, the better choice is obvious. He continues by pointing out that Zeke has absolutely no professional cooking experience. Even among beginners, he is only just starting to learn. If Risa needs employees, she could surely find people with more experience. Therefore, Reinhardt believes there is no reason for Zeke to remain there. According to him, the place where Zeke truly belongs is not Cafe Omusubai. Before leaving, Reinhardt makes one final request. He asks her that if she truly cares about Zeke, she should persuade him to return to the chivalric order. Back in the present, those words continue echoing in Risa's mind. While she watches Zeke mixing batter nearby, she quietly thinks about what Reinhardt says. If she truly cares about Zeke, the phrase refuses to leave her thoughts. She glances toward him and eventually asks whether he is really alright being there. Zeke misunderstands the question slightly and assumes she is referring to him spending his day off at the cafe. He casually replies that he is more or less free today anyway. Furthermore, he says that everything he learns there is extremely educational. He specifically mentions the pudding they recently make. According to him, the texture fascinates him. It appears solid at first glance, yet somehow melts into liquid inside the mouth. He concludes that pudding may actually be his favorite dessert among everything he has tasted so far. Risa listens quietly. Deep down, she believes people should be free to choose their own paths in life. However, whether remaining at the cafe is truly the best choice for Zeke is another matter entirely. The next day, business proceeds as usual. Customers begin arriving shortly after opening. Many of them immediately call out to Zeke the moment they enter. Some specifically request that he take their orders. Others wave him over to their tables. Watching the scene unfold, Risa cannot help comparing him to a giant panda at a zoo. People seem drawn toward him almost automatically. For this reason, she starts feeling slightly guilty. Zeke performs every task effortlessly and never complains, making the work appear deceptively easy. At times she wonders whether the cafe's popularity is actually due to her cooking or simply because customers enjoy seeing him. A little later, two women enter the cafe in the middle of an argument. One woman is practically dragging the other through the doorway. The reluctant woman insists that she could have lunch perfectly well at home and does not understand why she needs to go somewhere else. Her friend continues persuading her to at least try the cafe once. Eventually they sit down and order 2 sandwiches. When Risa confirms the order, the reluctant customer stares at the menu suspiciously. She points at the sandwich and asks what exactly it is. Risa explains that it is bread. The woman immediately responds that she already has bread at home. Then she admits that the only reason she agrees to come is to see the handsome employee everyone keeps talking about. Hearing this, Risa once again wonders whether customers would continue visiting if Zeke were not around. Perhaps without him the cafe would return to being little more than a bakery. Perhaps her cooking only satisfies herself. A short while later, she serves the sandwiches. The customers examine them curiously. One woman points out that the bread contains something between the slices. Risa explains that the filling consists of eggs and vegetables. She also demonstrates that the sandwich should simply be picked up and eaten by hand. The woman cautiously follows the instruction. The moment she takes a bite, her eyes widen. She immediately comments on how soft the bread is. At the same time, the vegetables provide a pleasant crisp texture. The combination surprises her completely. Before long, she openly declares that it tastes wonderful. Hearing those words fills Risa with happiness. She thanks them and hopes they enjoy their meal. As the customers continue eating, one of them remarks that she originally visits the cafe in hopes of seeing the handsome young man everyone talks about. However, she admits that she keeps returning for the food. That statement strikes Risa deeply. She realizes that regardless of how customers first arrive, whether through Tasia's recommendations, Zeke's popularity, or simple curiosity, they ultimately stay because they enjoy the dishes she creates. The food she prepares brings comfort and happiness to people. As this realization settles in, she experiences a feeling she has never quite felt before. In the past, praise always makes her happy. Yet this feeling is different. It feels deeper, more meaningful. It resembles the pride a true professional might feel when someone genuinely appreciates their work. For someone who never intends to become a chef, it is a surprisingly powerful emotion. Once again, she finds herself reflecting on how strange her life becomes. She is transported to another world completely against her will. Yet somehow she discovers something precious there. While she is lost in thought, Zeke quietly watches her. Seeing the expression on her face, he softly remarks that it is truly a relief. Risa looks toward him. Then she smiles. She agrees. Inwardly, however, she reaches a decision. Sooner or later, she needs to have a serious conversation with Zeke. There are important things he must carefully think through for himself. Only after considering everything: his future, his dreams, the chivalric order, and the life he wants to live can he make a choice he will never regret. And when that moment comes, she intends to help him find the answer. After the cafe closes for the day and the last customer leaves, the warm atmosphere inside Cafe Omusabai gradually settles into silence. The evening sun shines faintly through the windows while Risa begins tidying up the counter. However, one thing remains on her mind ever since her conversation with Reinhardt. For this reason, she decides that she can no longer keep the matter to herself. While Zeke is helping with the cleanup, she carefully tells him everything Reinhardt had said during their meeting. She explains how Reinhardt spoke about Zeke's talent, his future within the chivalric order, and how everyone once expected him to become one of its leading figures. She also tells him that Reinhardt believes Zeke's place is not inside a small cafe but within the ranks of the knights where his abilities can be fully utilized. Upon hearing all of this, Zeke becomes visibly surprised. It is clear that he never expected Reinhardt to speak to Risa directly about such matters. After remaining silent for a moment, he apologizes for causing trouble and involving her in something that should have been his responsibility. Risa immediately tells him that he has nothing to apologize for. She explains that she understands Reinhardt's concerns and that everything he said comes from genuine worry for a friend. Hearing this, Zeke falls quiet once again. His expression becomes difficult to read. After a long pause, he says that he understands and politely asks if he may leave for a little while. He assures her that he will return shortly. Although slightly worried, Risa agrees and tells him that she will finish closing the shop herself. Zeke then turns around and leaves the cafe. As she watches him disappear into the evening streets, Risa thinks that her assumption had been correct. She believes he simply needs time to sort through his thoughts. While wiping the tables, she reflects on her own circumstances. She thinks that under normal conditions she never would have chosen cooking as a profession either. If she had not been transported to another world, she would probably still be working in an office somewhere in Tokyo. Her entire life changed only because of her transfer to this world. And ever since arriving here, Zeke has been by her side more often than anyone else. Not long afterward, while she is preparing to finish closing the cafe alongside Basil, a familiar voice suddenly echoes from the entrance. Zeke announces that he is back. Risa startles in surprise. In her mind, she thinks that his return is far faster than expected. However, before she can say anything else, a loud scream follows. She turns toward the door and immediately freezes. Zeke is standing there while gripping someone by the collar. That someone is Reinhardt. Risa instantly shouts and asks what in the world he is doing. Without showing much concern, Zeke calmly explains that he knew Reinhardt was patrolling this district today. For this reason, he says that finding him was easy. Then, still holding the completely bewildered Reinhardt, he starts walking deeper into the cafe and casually asks whether there is still some pudding left in the refrigerator. Completely confused by the situation, Risa answers that there is. Without further explanation, Zeke continues dragging Reinhardt toward a table. After he passes by, Risa quickly asks Reinhardt what exactly is happening. Reinhardt looks equally confused. He complains that he has no idea either and explains that he was enjoying his break when Zeke suddenly appeared and dragged him away without properly explaining anything. Even then, Reinhardt points accusingly toward Risa and says that she must be filling Zeke's head with strange ideas again. Before Risa can respond, Zeke immediately returns and strikes Reinhardt on the head. The impact is not particularly strong, but it is enough to silence him. Zeke coldly tells his friend that customers should sit quietly. Watching the interaction, Risa cannot help thinking that he is being surprisingly harsh. After everyone sits down, Zeke finally begins explaining himself. He apologizes for not telling Risa his intentions beforehand. Then he turns toward Reinhardt and says that he understands why his friend became angry. According to Zeke, Reinhardt's concerns are reasonable. However, instead of arguing with words, Zeke places a bowl containing freshly made pudding in front of him. Reinhardt stares at it in confusion. He asks what exactly this is supposed to mean. Zeke simply tells him that it is his answer. When Reinhardt asks for clarification, Zeke instructs him to stop talking and taste it first. Although skeptical, Reinhardt picks up a spoon. The moment the pudding enters his mouth, his eyes widen dramatically. The rich sweetness spreads across his tongue while the smooth texture melts almost instantly. For several seconds he simply freezes. Then he hurriedly takes another spoonful. And then another. Before anyone realizes it, he is eating continuously. Astonishment fills his face as he asks what this incredible food is. He declares that it is the first time in his life he has tasted something like this. Watching his reaction, Zeke finally begins explaining. He tells Reinhardt that the Chivalric Order is undoubtedly a respectable organization dedicated to protecting public order and safeguarding citizens. However, he says that there are many ways to help people. Here at the cafe, he has discovered another path. He explains that food can raise people's spirits, comfort them, and bring happiness into their daily lives. For this reason, he wants to continue following this path. He firmly states that he has no intention of returning to the order. Reinhardt listens quietly. For a moment he simply stares at his friend. Then a small smirk appears on his face. He admits that he already suspected this would be Zeke's answer. After taking another bite of pudding, he finally concedes defeat. He says there is little left for him to argue about after experiencing something like this firsthand. Turning toward Risa, Reinhardt apologizes for venting his frustration at her. Risa immediately tells him that everything is fine. She understands that he was simply worried about his friend. At the same time, she lightly scolds Zeke for hitting Reinhardt. Zeke replies that she is far too soft. Risa smiles awkwardly before changing the topic. She explains that the pudding Reinhardt just ate is actually still a trial product. Both men become curious. Risa then begins discussing the recipe. She explains that egg yolks in this world possess a stronger aroma than those from her original world. For this reason, the pudding base becomes naturally sweeter. She further explains that she has been experimenting with the bitterness of the caramel sauce and wants feedback regarding the balance between the two elements. Almost immediately, Zeke and Reinhardt begin debating. One insists that pudding should emphasize sweetness. The other argues that the caramel sauce should leave a stronger impression. Before long, they are passionately arguing over dessert theory. Watching them, Risa cannot help smiling. She thinks that somehow they managed to discover an entirely new reason to fight. After spending some more time together, Reinhardt eventually stands up to leave. Before departing, he thanks them for the meal. As soon as he exits, Zeke remarks that his friend conveniently waited until after finishing every bite before leaving. Risa immediately tells him not to speak about people that way. Then her expression becomes thoughtful. She reflects on everything that happened today. She realizes that she has learned something important. Originally, cooking was simply a hobby she enjoyed for her own satisfaction. However, things are different now. The customers who visit her cafe laugh, smile, and create memories through her food. For this reason, she no longer wants to cook only for herself. She wants to create meals that genuinely make people happy. Turning towards Zeke, she asks him once more if he is truly certain about following a beginner manager like her. For the first time that evening, Zeke speaks without hesitation. He calls her by name. Then he calmly says that this is precisely the reason. Risa tilts her head in confusion. And then Zeke unexpectedly reveals that he has fallen in love. For a moment, Risa's eyes widen in complete shock. Her mind practically stops. Then Zeke casually finishes his sentence by explaining that he has fallen in love with her cuisine. The tension instantly disappears. Risa can only stare blankly before realizing what he actually means. Zeke continues by reminding her that she once said he showed promise. To him, those words were enough motivation to keep moving forward. Hearing that, Risa softly smiles. She tells him that they should continue doing their best together as fellow beginners running Cafe Omusubai. The two leave the cafe side by side, unaware that someone is secretly watching them. From the shadows behind a nearby wall, a mysterious figure hidden beneath a robe silently observes the pair. As the night deepens over the city, the unknown observer continues watching, suggesting that a new development is quietly beginning behind the scenes. In one of the quieter back alleys of the Kingdom of Feliformia stands Cafe Omusubai, a small but increasingly famous cafe that has gradually become the talk of the city. Although it appears modest from the outside, the cuisine served there is unlike anything the people of this world have ever experienced before. Almost every customer who visits ends up raising their voice in surprise, admiration, or pure delight after tasting the food. And that reaction is only natural. After all, the manager of the cafe, Risa, is not originally from this world. Having been brought from another world by the will of the goddess, she introduces dishes and flavors completely unknown to the people of Feliformia. For this reason, Cafe Omusubai continues growing in popularity with each passing day. One evening, after another successful day of business comes to an end, Risa stretches her arms and lets out a satisfied sigh. The cafe is quiet now, with only the warm glow of the lamps illuminating the interior. She comments that they did a good job today. Zeke immediately thanks her for her hard work. Risa returns the compliment and tells him that he performed wonderfully as always. Then she points out that they seem to have gained even more regular customers recently. For this reason, she wonders whether serving everyone is becoming increasingly difficult for him. After thinking for a moment, Zeke brings up a concern. He points out that perhaps they should increase bread production starting tomorrow. According to him, more and more customers are ordering sandwiches inside the cafe. As a result, they are beginning to struggle to keep up with demand. Hearing this, Risa falls into thought. Sandwiches are such an ordinary meal in her original world that she never considered them anything special. However, in Feliformia, even something as simple as placing ingredients between slices of soft bread feels completely new. For this reason, the sandwiches have become one of the cafe's most popular menu items. Even their bread sales continue rising day after day. Risa points out that increasing production would also increase Zeke's workload. However, Zeke immediately dismisses the concern. He explains that he does not mind at all. In fact, he reminds her that helping the cafe succeed is precisely why he chose to work there. Just then, Basil floats into the room and enthusiastically announces that she wants to help as well. Risa smiles warmly and thanks the little spirit. Then, filled with motivation, she declares that it is time for them to put in even more effort. Together, they will continue improving Cafe Omusubai and make it an even better place. As she says this, she reflects on how much time has already passed. It has been roughly 1 month since the cafe opened its doors. During that month, she has been blessed with an incredibly capable employee, steady support from the people around her, and days so busy that she barely has time to rest. Even better, sales continue climbing higher and higher. Everything seems to be going perfectly. At least, that is what she believes. Then something unusual happens. One morning, when Risa arrives at the cafe, she immediately notices a foul smell lingering near the entrance. As she approaches, she discovers a pile of discarded organic waste scattered directly in front of her shop. The sight makes her instinctively cover her nose. Confused and disturbed, she quietly wonders whether it is some kind of food waste. She immediately calls for Zeke. After arriving outside and examining the situation, Zeke's expression hardens. He concludes that it appears to be deliberate harassment. He explains that the mess was already there when he arrived earlier that morning. Without hesitation, he announces that he will clean everything up. Risa protests and insists that she should help. However, Zeke refuses. He reminds her that she still needs to prepare for opening time. If she wastes too much time outside, all of yesterday's preparation work could end up being for nothing. After hearing that, Risa reluctantly agrees. As she heads back into the kitchen, she thinks that he is right. Today requires a large amount of bread production, especially now that they have decided to increase their efforts. Meanwhile, Basil angrily hovers nearby. The spirit complains that it is unbelievably cruel for someone to dirty their master's shop like this. Risa agrees. She quietly comments that she wishes it were nothing more than a childish prank. However, Basil immediately responds that there is nothing harmless about behavior like this. Eventually, Zeke finishes cleaning and returns inside. Risa thanks him for handling such an unpleasant task. After washing his hands, Zeke informs her that he inspected the surrounding area. According to him, only Cafe Omusabai appears to have been targeted. None of the neighboring shops show signs of similar harassment. The realization leaves both of them uneasy. Zeke suggests reporting the matter to the chivalric order. From his perspective, it would be safer to have the incident officially recorded. However, Risa hesitates. She admits that she does not want to turn the situation into a major issue immediately. Perhaps someone simply acted out on impulse. Perhaps it was only a one-time occurrence. For this reason, she proposes waiting a little longer before involving the authorities. Although Zeke clearly remains unconvinced, he ultimately accepts her decision. Unfortunately, Risa's hopes prove overly optimistic. The harassment does not stop. Instead, similar incidents continue occurring over the following days. Sometimes garbage appears near the entrance. Other times small acts of vandalism make extra work for them before opening. None of the incidents cause serious damage, yet each one feels deliberately intended to irritate and inconvenience them. Day after day, the unpleasant behavior continues. As a result, Risa finally realizes that she can no longer ignore the situation. Since Reinhardt has become a frequent visitor to the cafe and is also a member of the chivalric order, she decides to seek his advice. After all, if anyone understands how to deal with troublemakers in the city, it would be him. And so, after enduring several days of increasingly suspicious harassment, Risa finally resolves to discuss the matter with Reinhardt the next time he visits Cafe Omusabai. The peaceful days of the cafe may not remain peaceful for much longer. After hearing about the repeated incidents around Cafe Omusabai, Reinhardt quickly comes to a conclusion. While sitting inside the cafe with Risa and Zeke, he comments that the situation is beginning to look like a full-fledged obstruction of business rather than a simple prank. He asks whether they have discovered any clues regarding the culprit's identity. Unfortunately, Risa shakes her head. She explains that she has not found a single lead. What troubles her even more is that she cannot remember doing anything that would earn this kind of hostility from someone. Reinhardt responds that sometimes people act out of unprovoked hatred. According to him, not every grudge has a logical reason behind it. As he says this, he gives Risa a suspicious look. Immediately noticing his gaze, Risa protests. She insists that although she might unknowingly inconvenience someone from time to time, there is no person among her acquaintances whom she can imagine harboring such resentment toward her. The conversation is interrupted when the door opens and their neighbor arrives. Risa immediately greets Angelica with a smile. Angelica apologizes for arriving later than expected and explains that she came to collect the bread she ordered. While Risa prepares the order, Reinhardt and Zeke continue talking in the background. Reinhardt asks whether their manager is doing all right after the incident with the drunk man. He recalls that the entire matter ended with little more than a fine and wonders if she ever gets angry about things. Zeke thinks for a moment before admitting that he has never actually seen Risa become angry. This answer surprises Reinhardt. He comments that her behavior is almost more dangerous than getting upset. According to him, she seems strangely calm regardless of what happens around her. He even jokes that she appears to live in a world entirely her own. Looking toward Risa, Reinhardt tells Zeke to observe her carefully. Zeke simply sighs and replies that he does not need reminding. Meanwhile, Angelica suddenly brings up something unexpected. She asks Risa what she was doing near the cafe late last night. Caught completely off guard, Risa asks what she means. Angelica explains that she saw someone heading toward the cafe during the night. Since it was such an unusual hour, she naturally assumed that it was Risa returning to retrieve something she had forgotten. As Angelica finishes speaking, Reinhardt immediately points toward her. His eyes widen as though a missing puzzle piece has suddenly fallen into place. Angelica jumps in surprise while Reinhardt excitedly explains his reasoning. According to him, if Angelica mistook the culprit for Risa despite living right next door, then the culprit must share a similar body type. Risa follows his logic and asks whether the person appeared to be a woman. Angelica thinks back carefully. She admits that the figure's stature seemed rather small and petite. The moment she says this, Reinhardt becomes even more confident in his theory. He dramatically declares that the culprit must be a girl who frequently visits the cafe and secretly has feelings for Zeke. Angelica instantly becomes enthusiastic. She loudly announces her support for the theory. Meanwhile, Zeke looks utterly confused and asks what they are talking about. Reinhardt complains that Zeke is hopelessly slow when it comes to matters of romance. He elaborates on his theory, claiming that a jealous customer is targeting the cafe out of envy toward Risa. According to him, the culprit likely wants Risa gone so she can have Zeke all to herself. The room falls silent. Both Risa and Zeke stare at Reinhardt with identical expressions of disappointment. At that moment, they seem to be thinking exactly the same thing. Reinhardt notices their reaction immediately and complains about the judgmental looks he is receiving. Eventually, he asks whether they want the chivalric order to apprehend the culprit. He even offers to arrange additional patrols around the area. However, Risa once again hesitates. She explains that the damage remains relatively minor. Since nothing truly serious has happened yet, she feels uncomfortable asking the knights to devote resources to such a small matter. Instead, she wonders whether it might be possible to persuade the culprit somehow. The moment she says this, Zeke repeats the word persuade as though he cannot believe what he just heard. Risa explains that if the culprit truly is one of their regular customers, then that person probably does not intend to cause genuine harm. She quietly reflects that although the behavior is troublesome, she can somewhat understand a girl developing feelings for someone like Zeke. Angelica then offers an alternative solution. She suggests that Risa spend the night at her house. Since she lives nearby, Risa could quickly return if anything happened. Before Risa can respond, everyone else immediately rejects the idea of her staying alone in the cafe overnight. Risa attempts to object, but the combined opposition leaves her with little room to argue. Seeing this, Angelica proposes a compromise. Rather than simply spending the night, she invites Risa over for dinner and an overnight stay. The invitation instantly cheers Risa up. She happily accepts. Afterward, Angelica and Reinhardt prepare to leave. Before departing, Reinhardt reminds her to contact the chivalric order immediately if the situation escalates. Risa thanks both of them and tells Angelica to visit again soon. Angelica responds that she first needs to tidy up her guest room. As they leave, Risa reflects that she will also need to explain the situation to the Claudes. Knowing how much they worry about her, she can already imagine their reaction. While she is thinking about this, Zeke suddenly studies her expression. He comments that she looks strangely happy. Surprised, Risa asks whether she really does. Zeke points out that she hardly resembles someone who has been the target of repeated harassment. After thinking about it, Risa admits that perhaps he is right. However, she explains that the recent events have also reminded her how many wonderful people she has met since arriving in this world. For this reason, she feels more blessed than troubled. Knowing that so many people are looking out for her makes the harassment seem insignificant by comparison. Before leaving, Zeke once again warns her not to lower her guard too much. Risa promises that she will remember his advice. The following day, after spending the night at Angelica's house, Risa prepares to leave early in the morning. Angelica is still half asleep when she comes to see her off. Risa thanks her for the hospitality and asks about Mr. Grunt. Angelica explains that her father is still sleeping. Risa laughs and asks her to pass along her regards. After saying goodbye, she begins walking toward Café Omusubai. Along the way, she reflects on how convenient it must be to live close to one's workplace. Thanks to the short distance, she was able to sleep much longer than usual. She also remembers the pleasant dinner they shared the previous evening. The atmosphere had been warm and comfortable, making her think that she would like to do it again someday. Lost in those thoughts, she approaches the alley where her cafe is located. Then suddenly she hears a faint noise coming from behind a nearby wall. The unexpected sound immediately startles her. Beside her, Basil becomes alert as well. The spirit quietly informs her that someone is there. Risa carefully turns toward the source of the noise. Standing partially concealed behind the wall is a figure wearing a robe. At almost the same moment, a loud cracking sound echoes through the alley. Then comes a burst of orange light. Risa's eyes widen. There is fire. Without hesitation, she rushes toward the wall and demands to know what the person is doing. The robed figure appears equally startled upon being discovered. For a brief moment they freeze. Then, in a panic, the mysterious person grabs several burning wooden crates and throws them in Risa's direction. Risa cries out in alarm. The crates crash to the ground, scattering sparks everywhere. What had previously been harassment suddenly becomes something far more dangerous. Risa's attention immediately shifts from the culprit to the growing flames. Her heart races. The fire spreads rapidly across the dry wood. She desperately pleads for the flames to die down, but of course they continue growing stronger. The heat intensifies with every passing second. As she stares at the expanding blaze, a terrifying realization strikes her. If this continues, the fire could easily spread to Cafe Omusubai, the shop she built with everyone else's support. The place where countless memories have already been created. The place she finally came to call her own. Panic begins rising inside her. She frantically searches for a solution, but the flames continue climbing higher. And as the fire threatens to consume everything she worked so hard to build, only one thought remains in her mind. At this rate, the entire cafe could burn down. The story then shifts to the perspective of the mysterious young woman who has been causing trouble for Cafe Omusubai. As she sits trembling in shock, her thoughts reveal what has been going through her mind all this time. She remembers hearing countless rumors spreading throughout the shopping district ever since Cafe Omusubai opens its doors. People everywhere speak about the strange bread sold there, claiming that it is unbelievably soft and delicious. Some even say that the royal family itself purchases bread from the shop. For this reason, the cafe quickly becomes one of the most talked about places in the capital. The girl remembers that she herself becomes curious after hearing those stories. She wants to visit the cafe and taste the famous bread with her own mouth. However, whenever she approaches the alley where the shop stands, fear and hesitation overtake her. Before she can enter, she always turns around and runs away. Back in the present, the fire continues growing more aggressive. Risa stares at the burning crates with widening eyes. The flames climb higher and higher, refusing to die down. She desperately thinks that if the fire continues spreading like this, the entire cafe could be lost. For this reason, she tries to calm herself and search for a solution. She thinks that water is needed immediately and tries to remember where the nearest source is. Then her expression suddenly changes. The smell reaching her nose is wrong. This is not merely the smell of burning wood. At that exact moment, Zeke arrives. He rushes toward the scene and shouts Risa's name. Risa immediately turns around. Relief appears on her face the moment she sees him. She anxiously asks what they should do and says that the cafe is going to burn down. Zeke quickly examines the fire. A moment later, he notices the same strange smell. His expression sharpens. Covering his nose, he realizes that some kind of accelerant has likely been used. Meanwhile, the girl responsible for the fire stares at the growing flames in horror. Her face turns pale as she mutters that she never intended for things to become like this. The fire is now spreading much faster than she expected. Zeke immediately tells Risa to stay away from the flames. He orders her to inform the neighbors while he handles the situation on this side. Risa nods without hesitation. As she begins running through the alley, countless thoughts rush to her mind. The cafe has only existed for a short period of time. And yet, during that brief time, it becomes filled with precious memories. She remembers the kind customers who visit every day. She remembers Angelica's cheerful support. She remembers Gil and Tasia welcoming her into their family. She remembers Basil constantly staying by her side. This little cafe gradually becomes a place she can truly call home. Then another thought appears. She remembers Zeke. The memory causes her chest to tighten. She thinks that she does not want this place to disappear. She does not want to lose the place where all those memories are gathered. For this reason, she runs as fast as she can. She reaches Angelica's house and begins pounding on the door with all her strength. When Angelica opens the door, Risa hurriedly explains the situation while nearly crying from panic. The moment Angelica understands what is happening, she immediately springs into action. She runs through the neighborhood alerting everyone she can find. Before long, people begin gathering from all directions. Neighbors arrive carrying buckets. Shopkeepers leave their businesses to help. Even passers-by stop to lend a hand. Everyone works together. Bucket after bucket of water is thrown onto the flames. Risa herself joins the effort. She repeatedly carries water despite her shaking legs. The struggle continues for some time. Finally, the fire begins weakening. A little later, the flames are completely extinguished. One of the men examining the damage announces that only part of the exterior wall is burned and that the fire never spreads into the building itself. Upon hearing those words, Risa immediately asks about the cafe. Angelica smiles and reassures her that the cafe is safe. The moment Risa hears that, all strength leaves her body. The tension she has been carrying suddenly disappears. Her knees give way. Before she can fall, Zeke catches her. Basil, Angelica, and several others gather around her in concern. Feeling embarrassed, Risa apologizes and admits that her legs simply stopped working from relief. Zeke quietly looks at her while supporting her weight. Nearby, several townspeople chat among themselves. They remark that the most important thing is that nobody gets hurt. Others agree and say that it is fortunate the cafe is still closed when the fire starts. Listening to their words, Risa becomes emotional. She bows deeply toward everyone. She thanks them sincerely for helping her. The townspeople simply smile. They explain that neighbors should help one another whenever someone is in trouble. They ask whether she needs any further assistance. Risa assures them that everything is fine now. Even so, she apologizes for causing everyone so much trouble. She also thanks Mr. Grunt for allowing her to stay at his house. Mr. Grunt laughs and tells her not to worry. He says she can always rely on him whenever she needs help. After things calm down, Angelica approaches Risa. She says that the fire likely has something to do with the harassment incidents that have been occurring recently. Zeke agrees. He explains that they will know the truth once the culprit is questioned. Then he brings forward the person he catches hiding in the shadows. Holding the girl's arm firmly, he presents her before everyone. The moment Angelica sees her face, she freezes. Her eyes widen in recognition. She immediately asks whether the girl is not the daughter from Chester's bakery. Risa is surprised. A baker's daughter? The revelation catches everyone off guard. Risa quickly asks whether Angelica knows her. Angelica confirms it. Realizing that the situation has become more complicated than expected, Risa asks Angelica to bring the girl's parents. Angelica agrees and immediately leaves. After she is gone, Risa turns toward the trembling girl. Instead of becoming angry, she quietly asks whether she is all right. The girl looks confused by the question. Risa observes her carefully and notes that she does not appear injured. For this reason, she suggests that they talk inside the cafe. A short time later, everyone moves indoors. The girl sits nervously at a table while Zeke stands nearby. Zeke begins questioning her about the recent harassment incidents. He asks whether she is responsible for them. The girl remains silent. After waiting for a response, Zeke comments that silence itself is an answer. Before the conversation can continue, the door suddenly bursts open. A middle-aged man rushes inside. The moment he sees the girl, he shouts her name. Angelica arrives alongside him. After confirming that the father is present, Angelica says she will leave the rest to them and departs. Risa thanks her for everything she has done. She then turns toward the man and politely asks whether he is the girl's guardian. The man immediately begins scolding his daughter. He demands to know whether she truly understands what she has done. Without warning, he grabs her and forces her to stand. Then both father and daughter bow deeply before Risa. They apologize repeatedly. The father admits that everything is his daughter's fault. He says they are truly sorry for the damage and trouble she causes. Seeing them kneeling and apologizing so seriously, Risa becomes momentarily distracted. She stares in fascination. To her amazement, prostrating oneself in apology apparently exists in this world too. Before he can continue further, Helena suddenly raises her voice. She insists that her father is not at fault. The moment the words leave her mouth, she realizes she interrupts him. Embarrassed, she lowers her head. After a brief silence, she admits that everything is true. She confesses that all of the harassment incidents over the past several days are her doing. The litter left outside the cafe, the disturbances, and the suspicious behavior around the alley all originate from her. Tears begin gathering in her eyes. However, she hurriedly adds that she never intends to burn the cafe down. She explains that she only wants to cause a small disturbance. For that purpose, she uses a special type of wood that emits an unpleasant smell when burned. The moment she mentions the wood, Zeke immediately recognizes it. He explains that the chivalric order occasionally uses the same material during field exercises as a type of insect repellent. Risa suddenly realizes why the smoke smells so unusual earlier. Zeke further explains that the wood is extremely flammable. For this reason, it must always be handled carefully. Upon hearing that, Helena's face becomes pale. She tearfully admits that she has no idea it is so dangerous. Her father immediately scolds her. He asks whether she understands how serious the situation could have become. If someone had been injured, ignorance would not excuse her actions. Not knowing the consequences does not make a person innocent. Helena finally breaks down completely. She shouts that she only acts that way because she fears for her family's bakery. She asks whether anyone understands what people have been saying behind their backs. As tears continue running down her face, she recalls the cruel comments she overhears throughout town. People say that Chester's bread is disgusting. Others claim that the bakery only survives through old prestige. Some even suggest that the royal supplier signboard should be taken down and handed to Café Omusabai instead. Those words wound her deeply. She explains that more and more regular customers are visiting Café Omusabai. Meanwhile, her father's bakery continues losing business. To her, it feels as though her family's honor is being trampled upon. She says that her father's bakery means everything to her. For that reason, she becomes desperate. The room falls silent. Then Risa finally speaks. Her voice remains calm, but there is a firmness behind it that immediately captures everyone's attention. She tells Helena that if she truly values her family's bakery, then she should understand that her actions are only damaging its reputation further. No matter how much Helena dirties Café Omusabai or even attempts to burn it, Risa says she can eventually recover from those losses. Walls can be repaired. Furniture can be replaced. Business can return. However, the reputation stained through dishonest actions is far harder to restore. Risa tells her that every act of harassment committed in the bakery's name only harms the honorable legacy Helena claims to protect. If she genuinely treasures her family's bakery, she should never choose such methods. Those words strike Helena harder than any scolding. Unable to hold back any longer, she collapses forward onto the table. Burying her face in her arms, she cries openly. She repeatedly apologizes between sobs. Nearby, Zeke quietly watches the scene. As he observes Risa's expression, he realizes something unusual. Risa is angry. Not loudly, not violently, but genuinely angry. For someone as gentle as Risa, that alone says a great deal. After allowing Helena some time to calm down, Risa turns towards Zeke. She asks what kind of punishment would normally apply in a case like this. Zeke immediately answers. He explains that attempted arson is considered a serious felony. Depending on the circumstances, the punishment could involve community service, fines, or even more severe penalties. The moment Paul hears that, he becomes visibly alarmed. He immediately bows again. He desperately asks for leniency. Risa's expression does not soften. She calmly states that she is not such a charitable person that she can simply pretend nothing happens. Paul lowers his head even further. He says that he and his daughter are prepared to compensate her for the damages. No matter what it takes, they will accept responsibility. He begs her to spare Helena from criminal punishment. For a few moments, Risa remains silent. Then she suddenly asks Paul a question. She asks whether he is truly a baker. Confused by the sudden change in topic, Paul answers that he is. The next moment, Risa's expression brightens dramatically. As though she has just discovered the perfect solution, she claps her hands together. Then she cheerfully announces that she has made her decision. She declares that Paul and Helena will repay their debt with their bodies. The words echo throughout the room. For several seconds, absolute silence follows. Then every person present freezes. Paul's eyes nearly pop out of his head. Helena immediately stops crying. Zeke stares blankly. Even Basil looks confused. A moment later, everyone in the room simultaneously shouts, "EH!" And thus, with a completely unexpected declaration from Risa, the situation takes yet another bizarre turn. As the days pass, a brand new topic begins circulating throughout the capital. People all across the shopping district start talking about Cafe Omusubai. The news spreads quickly that the cafe has temporarily closed in order to repair damage caused by the recent fire incident. Since the shop has become extremely popular within a short period of time, many customers immediately become concerned. Groups of townspeople can often be seen chatting about it while shopping. Some complain that they have become completely accustomed to buying their daily bread from Cafe Omusubai and no longer know where else to go. Others wonder how long the repairs will take. A few regular customers even joke that their mornings no longer feel complete without stopping by the little cafe hidden in the alley. Some people ask whether the shop might at least sell bread somewhere else while repairs are underway. For this reason, anticipation for the reopening continues growing day by day. Meanwhile, inside Cafe Omusubai, things are far from peaceful. Rather than enjoying a break during the closure, Risa finds herself busier than ever. Standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed, she carefully watches Paul work. The moment she notices a mistake, she immediately points it out. She tells him that he is doing it incorrectly and reminds him that she has already explained the procedure several times. She explains that when adjusting the softness of bread dough, flour should be used rather than water. Furthermore, she emphasizes that while experienced bakers may eventually learn to estimate quantities by sight, products intended for sale must remain consistent. Every loaf should taste the same. Every customer should receive the same quality. For this reason, she insists that recipes must be followed accurately. Paul immediately apologizes. He admits that he forgets and unconsciously returns to his old habits. Watching him, Risa cannot help sighing internally. She recalls Paul proudly mentioning that his family bakery has measured ingredients by eye for generation. To Risa, that explanation answers many questions. She thinks that this lack of precision is probably one of the major reasons food quality in this world varies so dramatically from one cook to another. Unlike Zeke, who begins learning from scratch and therefore absorbs every lesson exactly as taught, Paul has spent decades baking according to his own methods. Changing those deeply ingrained habits proves far more difficult. Ironically, the experience that should help him becomes his greatest obstacle. Who could have guessed that years of professional experience would actually make learning harder? Elsewhere in the cafe, another source of trouble is creating chaos. Helena is helping with various tasks. Unfortunately, almost everything she touches seems to result in an accident. At one point, she accidentally spills water across an entire table. She hurriedly apologizes. Before she can panic further, Zeke calmly announces that he will bring something to wipe it up. Watching the scene, Risa cannot help feeling slightly exhausted. She thinks that both she and Zeke appear to be having a surprisingly difficult time managing their new recruits. Only a few days earlier she believes accepting them seems like such a brilliant idea. That thought immediately brings back memories of the previous discussion. At that time, after Risa announces that Paul and Helena will repay their debt with their bodies, both father and daughter become absolutely terrified. They immediately imagine something far more sinister. The two of them nervously ask who exactly she plans to sell them to. Realizing how badly her words are misunderstood, Risa hurriedly clarifies herself. She explains that she means labor. Nothing more. Nothing less. She then reveals her actual plan. Paul will learn to make Cafe Omusubai's bread. Meanwhile, Helena will join the waitstaff. The moment she proposes this arrangement, Zeke immediately objects. He reminds her to consider what Helena has done. After all, the girl nearly burns the cafe down. His concern causes Risa to hesitate slightly. Paul, meanwhile, looks completely confused. He asks whether helping at the cafe is truly all she expects from them. Risa confirms that it is. She explains that in Helena's case, labor is simply the most appropriate way to repay the cost of repairs. Put plainly, Helena will work without wages until her debt is considered repaid. When asked directly whether she accepts those conditions, Helena nervously agrees. After settling that matter, Risa immediately shifts the discussion toward business. She asks Paul how much he currently sells his bread for. Paul answers that a loaf costs 1 lyre. Upon hearing that, Risa presents her proposal. She says that if she teaches him how to produce Cafe Omusubai's bread properly, she wants him to continue selling bread to her at that same price. Furthermore, she requests a fixed daily delivery except on holidays. Naturally, quality must remain consistent. However, she also makes it clear that she has no objection whatsoever to Chester's Bakery selling the same bread independently at Cafe Omusubai's retail price of 2.5 lyre. Paul is stunned. He asks whether she is truly comfortable with such an arrangement. After all, she is essentially sharing one of her most successful products. Risa explains her reasoning. She reminds him that the entire reason she opens the cafe and shares recipes through the Ashley Company is to spread new cuisine and new methods of cooking throughout the kingdom. For this reason, she sees no contradiction in helping another bakery improve. If more people enjoy better food, then her goal is being achieved. Paul becomes deeply moved. He admits that the offer is far more generous than anything he could have hoped for. Looking toward Helena, he silently exchanges a glance with his daughter. Then both of them stand up. Once again they bow deeply toward Risa. They apologize sincerely for all the trouble they cause. Risa smiles and tells them not to worry about the past. From now on, she says, they will simply work together. Privately, she thinks that improving Chester's bakery may ultimately benefit everyone involved. If the bakery succeeds, the local food culture improves. If the bakery supplies Cafe Omusabai, her own workload becomes lighter. It is a solution with advantages for both sides. At least that is what she believes. Reality, unfortunately, proves somewhat different. A short while later, Paul proudly approaches carrying a freshly baked loaf. He announces that the bread is finished. Risa eagerly examines the result. The moment she touches it, her expression freezes. The loaf is hard. Very hard. In fact, it is somehow even harder than before. Risa immediately shouts in disbelief. She asks how such a thing is even possible. Paul can only apologize once again. Looking at the bread, Risa starts wondering whether Paul possesses some supernatural curse that transforms every loaf he touches into a rock. Nearby, both Paul and Helena sit in complete despair. Their shoulders droop. Their expressions become gloomy. After all the confidence they feel earlier, the result is devastating. Seeing them so depressed, Risa eventually softens. She walks over and gently reassures them. She reminds them that it is only their first day. Nobody masters something new immediately. Instead of dwelling on mistakes, she encourages them to eat a proper meal and regain their energy. Today's menu is particularly comforting. She serves creamy stew filled with vegetables and rich flavor. Alongside it comes a fresh mallow salad. To complete the meal, she prepares refreshing real fruit juice. The warm aroma quickly fills the room. As the two exhausted trainees stare at the food before them, their gloomy expressions begin improving ever so slightly. And thus, despite the fire, the harassment, the endless training, and even Paul's seemingly supernatural ability to create stone-like bread, life at Cafe Omusabai continues moving forward one busy day at a time. Inside the temporarily closed Cafe Omusabai, the atmosphere gradually becomes calmer as everyone gathers around the table for a meal after another long day of training and repairs. Paul carefully examines the food arranged before him. His eyes widen with admiration as he studies the presentation. He comments that the meal looks magnificent and adds that even the arrangement of colors is beautiful. The vegetables, bread, stew, and salad all complement one another so naturally that the table itself appears inviting. Risa thanks him for the compliment and explains that this is the kind of food they normally serve at the cafe. Meanwhile, Zeke uses the opportunity as part of Helena's training. He reminds her that she should memorize the dishes and ingredients properly. Customers frequently ask questions about the menu, and for this reason she needs to understand every item they sell. Helena immediately agrees. Risa quietly observes the two of them. She thinks that Zeke has adapted surprisingly well to teaching despite having no previous experience. As for Helena, she appears far more nervous around him than necessary. Whenever Zeke speaks to her, she straightens her back like a recruit standing before an officer. Seeing this, Risa finds the situation somewhat amusing. Eventually, she announces that everyone should begin eating. Paul folds his hands and offers a prayer before the meal. Beside him, Helena stares at the bread. This is the bread everyone throughout town keeps talking about. She remembers overhearing countless conversations. People constantly compare Chester's bakery to Cafe Omusabai. Many claim that Cafe Omusabai's bread is incomparably better. Others criticize Chester's products without restraint. Those memories surface as she slowly picks up a piece of bread. After hesitating for a moment, she takes a bite. The moment she does, a small voice escapes her lips. She blurts out that it is delicious. Immediately afterward, she realizes she speaks aloud. Embarrassed, she lowers her head. Risa looks at her curiously. Helena hurriedly apologizes. However, Risa simply smiles and tells her not to worry. She points out that Helena is finally getting the chance to taste the bread she tries so hard to obtain before. Helena admits that she visits the cafe several times intending to buy some, but each time her pride prevents her from entering. Now that she finally tastes it, she understands why everyone praises it. As difficult as it is to admit, she realizes the customers are right. The bread truly is delicious. Nearby, Zeke watches with a slightly confused expression. He does not fully understand why Helena becomes emotional over a loaf of bread. Paul gently reassures his daughter. He tells her not to worry and promises that before long he will be capable of baking bread like this himself. Then he turns toward Risa. His expression becomes serious. He admits that the past few days make him realize just how much he still has to learn. Despite being older and having years of experience, he asks her not to show him any special treatment. He requests that she continue teaching him strictly. No matter how many failures occur, he vows that he will eventually bake bread she can genuinely enjoy. Risa smiles. She tells him that she fully intends to do exactly that. Watching father and daughter, she feels relieved. Although she initially worries about accepting them into the cafe, she gradually becomes convinced that she makes the correct decision. The following day, training resumes. Risa decides that if Paul is truly going to produce Cafe Omusabai's bread consistently, then he must understand every step of the process from the beginning. For this reason, she introduces him to yeast making. Paul looks puzzled when the subject comes up. Risa explains that yeast is essentially the thing responsible for making bread light and airy. She carefully demonstrates the process. First, a glass jar is sterilized with boiling water. Next, a real fruit is cut into pieces without removing the skin or seeds. The pieces are placed inside the jar. A spoonful of honey is added. After that, a small amount of cooled boiled water is poured in, just enough to cover the ingredients. Paul carefully follows each instruction exactly. When he finishes, he looks into the jar and asks whether that is truly all there is to it. Risa explains that the preparation is complete, but the real work is only beginning. The mixture must sit for several days before it becomes usable. The jar needs to be stored in a warm place. It must be mixed daily and allowed to breathe. Neglecting any step could ruin the entire batch. She adds that if they possessed a fermentation basket, maintaining a stable temperature would be much easier. Paul immediately reveals that he already orders one for his bakery. It should arrive soon. Pleased by his enthusiasm, Risa continues the lesson. She explains that the beneficial transformation caused by yeast is called fermentation. When ingredients improve and develop flavor, fermentation is occurring. When ingredients rot and become unusable, that is decomposition. The distinction is important. To demonstrate, she shows him a mature batch of yeast liquid. Tiny bubbles rise through the liquid. A faint hissing sound can be heard. She explains that once those signs appear, the yeast is ready. Paul stares at it in fascination. The entire process seems almost magical to him. Risa then explains that this yeast liquid, combined with wheat flour, forms the foundation of the bread served at Cafe Omusabai. Although the process requires patience and effort, it is absolutely necessary. Paul becomes increasingly impressed. He admits that he has never seen such a detailed and elaborate method of bread making before. In his eyes, Risa's cooking reaches a high level precisely because she refuses to cut corners. His motivation immediately reignites. Filled with determination, he announces that he wants to try baking another loaf. This time he promises to follow every measurement exactly and weigh every ingredient properly. Risa encourages him and tells him that this is the attitude she wants to see. Meanwhile, training continues on the customer service side as well. Looking across the room, Risa wonders how Helena is progressing. Zeke is currently instructing her. He explains that every order must be recorded carefully. If a customer orders a drink alongside a meal, both items should be written on the same line. He then begins explaining how orders should be organized according to timing and preparation. The explanation quickly becomes complicated. Helena struggles to keep up. Eventually, she interrupts him. She politely asks whether he can slow down. Then she asks if she may borrow writing utensils. She admits that her memory is not particularly good, but she does not want customers receiving poor service because of her shortcomings. For this reason, she wants to write everything down properly. Zeke pauses. After a moment of silence, he turns around and retrieves several sheets of paper. He explains that they are unused scraps from old bank forms that Risa tells him to save for notes. If Helena needs more, there are plenty available. He hands them to her. Helena gratefully thanks him. Watching the interaction, Risa realizes there is never any need to worry. Despite his stern appearance, Zeke is surprisingly considerate. Several more days pass. Little by little, everyone's hard work begins producing results. Paul finally masters the techniques necessary to bake proper wheat bread and bread rolls. For the first time, the loaves emerging from the oven are genuinely soft. Instead of resembling stones, they actually resemble bread. The achievement fills him with pride. At the same time, Helena steadily improves as well. She begins arriving earlier than anyone else. Without being asked, she cleans the cafe every morning. She helps organize supplies, wipes tables, and assists with repairs. Day by day, the damage caused by the fire disappears. The walls regain their former appearance. The furniture is restored. The atmosphere gradually returns to normal. Before long, Cafe Omusabai once again looks exactly as it did before the incident. Finally, the long-awaited day arrives. After weeks of effort, training, repairs, and personal growth, everything is ready. The sign is polished. The ovens are warm. Fresh bread fills the air with its aroma. The staff stand prepared. And with its former charm fully restored, Cafe Omusabai opens its doors once again. The story continues on the long-awaited reopening day of Cafe Omusabai. After several difficult days spent repairing the damage caused by the harassment incidents and the fire, the cafe is finally ready to welcome customers once again. Early in the morning, Paul Chester arrives carrying several freshly baked loaves of bread in his arms. The moment he steps inside, he cheerfully greets Risa. She returns the greeting and immediately notices the pleasant aroma drifting from the bread he has brought with him. Looking over the loaves carefully, she comments that they are finally baked properly and have the soft texture she has been aiming for all this time. For this reason, she says she can now confidently sell them in the cafe without any worries. Paul proudly remarks that all the training has finally begun paying off. Risa agrees and says that she intends to spread the word that the bread served at Cafe Omusabai is now being baked at Chester Bakery as well. However, despite her optimism, she admits that the cafe has been closed for some time, so she is not entirely certain whether their regular customers will return immediately. Just then, Helena arrives as well. The moment she enters, she lowers her head and apologizes once again for all the trouble she caused. Risa quickly stops her and explains that she is not trying to blame her anymore. Instead, she says that today should be considered Helena's official debut as a member of the cafe staff. She gently tells her not to make such a gloomy face and reminds her that the only thing she needs to focus on now is doing her job properly. Helena quietly agrees, although the sadness and guilt still remain visible on her face. A short while later, Zeke appears and informs everyone that everything is ready for opening. Paul bows deeply toward Risa once more, grateful for everything she has done for him and his daughter. Risa thanks him for all his hard work as well. Zeke then announces that it is finally time to open the cafe. Filled with enthusiasm, Risa declares that they should greet this wonderful new workday with all their strength. With those words, the doors of Cafe Omusabai open once again. Risa has been mentally preparing herself for a slow reopening. She assumes that it may take time for customers to return after everything that has happened. However, the moment the doors swing open, she is completely stunned. A large group of familiar faces is already waiting outside. Standing at the front is Angelica, holding a beautiful bouquet of flowers. With a bright smile, she congratulates Risa on the reopening of the cafe. The sight catches Risa completely off guard. Angelica is not alone either. Several people from the toolmaker's shop are there as well. Even Gil and Tasia have come. Risa can barely hide her surprise as she asks whether they all really came. Angelica responds as though it is the most obvious thing in the world. She says there is no way they would miss the reopening after everything that happened. Gil remarks that the whole incident was quite an ordeal. Tasia happily adds that she has been eagerly waiting for the cafe to reopen so she can eat there again. Listening to all these warm words one after another, Risa feels her eyes beginning to fill with tears. Meanwhile, Zeke professionally steps forward and welcomes the customers before she even has the chance to respond. Looking at everyone gathered there, Risa realizes something she had never fully understood before. She never knew so many people genuinely cared about this cafe. For a moment, she thinks she might actually start crying. At that moment, Helena steps forward and offers to take care of the flowers. Grateful for the help, Risa thanks her and asks her to handle them. Angelica notices Helena and immediately recognizes her. Confused, she asks whether Helena is not the same girl involved in the fire incident. Risa calmly explains that Helena is now working at the cafe. She asks Angelica not to worry and assures her that Helena is not a bad person at heart. Although Angelica still looks surprised, she decides to trust Risa's judgment. Instead of dwelling on the past, she suddenly asks Helena how old she is. Helena quietly answers that she is 16 years old. Angelica immediately smiles and points out that they are only about a year apart in age. She introduces herself as one of the cafe's regular customers and enthusiastically says it is nice to meet her. For a moment Helena stands frozen, unsure how to react. Then she politely introduces herself as well. Angelica quickly changes the subject and begins talking about the bouquet. She proudly explains that she personally selected all the flowers. Watching the interaction from a distance, Risa notices something remarkable. The tension between them seems to melt away almost instantly. She cannot help thinking that this is exactly the kind of person Angelica is. Meanwhile, Basil remains unconvinced. The spirit crosses her arms and complains that she still dislikes Helena for harassing her master. Risa gently smiles and thanks Basil for worrying about her. Then she suggests that if Basil is truly that concerned, perhaps she should watch over Helena herself. Basil tilts her head in confusion. Risa points out that Helena cannot see spirits anyway. Therefore, Basil could secretly keep an eye on her while Risa focuses on cooking. Hearing this, Basil immediately salutes dramatically and declares that she accepts the mission. Zeke suddenly approaches and informs Risa that orders are already coming in. He notices her talking to apparently empty air and senses something strange but decides not to question it. Risa simply explains that Basil has gone on an errand. Meanwhile, Basil secretly vows that she will watch Helena closely to ensure she never does anything suspicious again. Inside the cafe, Helena begins serving customers. She approaches one table and politely asks whether they are ready to order. The customers request 2 sandwich lunch sets, a Swiss roll, a scone for dessert, and cups of herbal tea. Helena carefully repeats the order back to them to confirm every detail. At another table, a customer asks what cream stew is. Remembering her training, Helena confidently explains that it is a soup-like dish made using milk as its base. Watching from nearby, Basil is forced to admit that everything appears to be going smoothly so far. She grudgingly thinks that perhaps Zeke's training did not go to waste after all. Still, she refuses to lower her guard completely. As Helena continues working, she welcomes another group of customers and politely offers to guide them to their seats. One of the men looks at her closely and remarks that she seems unfamiliar. Helena introduces herself and says she is new. The man stares at her for several seconds before suddenly remembering something. His eyes widen. Then, far louder than necessary, he blurts out that she is the girl involved in that fire incident. The entire cafe falls silent. Everyone turns to look. Basil immediately wishes he had not shouted so loudly. The man continues speaking and says he heard the fire was caused by a disinfection attempt that went wrong. He asks whether she was the one responsible. The woman accompanying him quickly tries to stop him, saying he is being rude. Helena feels her face grow hot with embarrassment. Remembering how Risa had gone around the neighborhood personally apologizing to everyone after the incident only makes her feel worse. The man continues lecturing her and says she should be more careful when handling fire. Helena lowers her head and apologizes sincerely, saying she cannot apologize enough for all the trouble she caused. However, the conversation has already attracted attention. Whispers begin spreading throughout the cafe. Several customers start discussing the matter among themselves. One woman remarks that she knows Helena. She says Helena is the daughter of the bakery that supplies bread to the royal household. Another customer expresses disbelief that Cafe Omusabai would hire someone responsible for causing so much trouble, especially someone connected to a rival bakery. As more people begin talking, the atmosphere gradually grows uncomfortable. Helena can feel countless eyes directed toward her. Every word makes her sink deeper into embarrassment. Watching the scene unfold, Risa feels a painful ache in her chest. She knows better than anyone how hard Helena has been working to make up for her mistakes. She has arrived earlier than anyone else every morning, cleaned tirelessly, studied customer service, and done everything possible to earn a second chance. Now, seeing Helena standing there while customers judge her solely based on her past actions fills Risa with sadness. As the whispers continue spreading throughout the cafe, Risa quietly watches Helena and realizes that this may be the first real test of the second chance she decided to give her. The story continues during the hectic days following Cafe Omusabai's reopening. Although the cafe has successfully resumed business, the aftermath of the fire incident still lingers in the minds of some customers. During a particularly busy afternoon, Zeke notices Helena standing quietly while distracted by the whispers surrounding her. Remaining as calm as ever, he simply tells her to focus on setting the tables. Helena immediately responds and returns to work. However, deep inside, her thoughts are far from calm. She thinks that receiving cold stares from customers is only natural. After all, she believes she deserves every bit of criticism directed at her. In her mind, she reminds herself that she is the one responsible for causing so much trouble in the first place. Even so, she forces a smile onto her face and continues serving customers. Whenever she places dishes on a table, she politely wishes them an enjoyable meal. Despite her efforts, the burden in her heart continues growing heavier. Later, during a short break, she finds herself sitting alone in a quiet corner. Unable to hold back her emotions any longer, she begins crying softly. Nearby, Basil watches the scene unfold. At first, the spirit feels irritated. She thinks that Helena has no right to cry after everything she has done to her beloved master. However, as she continues observing her, Basil gradually notices something different. Helena is not crying out of self-pity. She is genuinely regretting her actions. She is sincerely trying to make amends. For this reason, Basil begins feeling guilty herself. She realizes that perhaps she has been too harsh. The spirit quietly admits to herself that Helena truly is doing everything she can to make up for her mistakes. Just as Basil is about to call out to her, Helena suddenly wipes away her tears and stands up. Determination returns to her eyes. She tells herself that all she needs to do is continue giving her best effort at the cafe. Her break is over. There is still work waiting for her. With renewed resolve, she heads back inside. Basil hurriedly tries to stop her, wanting to say something encouraging, but Helena is already gone before the spirit can finish. Soon afterward, the cafe becomes busier than ever. Customers continue pouring in one after another. Helena barely has time to rest. Watching her from above, Basil cannot help feeling impressed. Only moments ago Helena had been crying so hard. Now she is smiling brightly while serving customers. At one table, a regular customer happily comments that she loves the food served at Cafe Omusabai. The customer explains that when the cafe suddenly closed after the fire incident, she did not know what to do. Therefore, she is extremely happy that she can enjoy her favorite dishes once again. Helena silently listens to those words. The sincerity behind them leaves a strong impression on her. A moment later, another customer calls for her. She quickly rushes over. However, her mind is still occupied by everything she has heard throughout the day. As a result, her foot catches awkwardly on the floor. She slips and falls. The customer immediately becomes concerned and tells her not to rush so much. Embarrassed, Helena apologizes and assures them that she is fine. After slowly standing back up, the customer asks whether the cafe is always this busy. Helena admits that she is still new, so she cannot say for certain. The customer then explains that although many of the menu items are unfamiliar, Helena's explanations have been very easy to understand. Smiling warmly, the customer thanks her and says that thanks to her guidance, they were able to enjoy a wonderful meal. They encourage her to keep up the good work. The moment Helena hears those words, tears begin gathering in her eyes once again. This time, however, they are not tears of guilt. They are tears of gratitude. Holding back her emotions, she politely thanks the customer. As she walks away, she cannot stop thinking. If the cafe had truly burned down that day, she never would have heard such kind words. Just as she treasures her father's bakery, there are clearly people who treasure Cafe Omusabai in exactly the same way. For the first time, she fully understands what Risa had been trying to tell her. Eventually, the busy day finally comes to an end. The customers leave one after another. The doors close. The cafe grows quiet. Stretching her arms happily, Risa comments that it has been another good day of work. Then she notices Helena looking exhausted. Concerned, she asks whether she is all right. Helena honestly admits that she is barely able to remain standing. Zeke comments that she endured the day surprisingly well. Helena assumes he is referring to customer service and accounting duties. However, Zeke shakes his head. He explains that he is talking about the conversations surrounding the fire incident. He admits that he heard many of the remarks customers were making throughout the day. According to him, those rumors will probably continue for some time. Helena simply nods. Then she realizes something. Zeke was worried about her. The realization surprises her greatly. Seeing her reaction, Zeke remarks that she really is difficult to read. Helena smiles slightly. She explains that she wants to apologize and make amends personally. For this reason, she is willing to endure whatever criticism comes her way. Risa quietly watches the exchange. Then she asks Basil what she thinks. To everyone's surprise, Basil says that she no longer objects. The spirit admits that she has changed her opinion. Hearing this approval makes Helena visibly happy. After a brief silence, Helena gathers her courage. Then she asks Risa an important question. She wonders whether she will still be allowed to work at Café Omusabai after she finishes paying off the repair costs. She confesses that she genuinely wants to continue working there from the bottom of her heart. The statement surprises everyone. Even Zeke turns toward her. Risa looks at Helena for several moments. Then she asks whether Helena knows what Omusabai means. Helena recalls that it is a rice dish from Risa's homeland and says so. Risa nods. She explains that Omusabai is more than just food. To her, it symbolizes people becoming connected through meals. Food has the power to bring individuals together. That philosophy is the very foundation upon which Café Omusabai was built. For this reason, she tells Helena that she is genuinely happy to have formed a bond with her. As she says this, Risa extends her hand. Helena's eyes immediately fill with tears. Unable to stop them, she reaches forward. Risa warmly welcomes her to Café Omusabai. The two shake hands. It is a simple gesture, yet it marks the beginning of a completely new chapter for Helena. Then, almost as an afterthought, Risa points toward the empty air nearby and casually mentions that there is also a spirit present. Helena freezes. Completely bewildered, she asks where. Meanwhile, Basil proudly puffs out her chest despite remaining invisible. The scene ends on a cheerful note. With the problems surrounding the cafe finally settled, life begins returning to normal. For the first time in a long while, Risa finds herself enjoying a long-awaited day off at the Claude Mansion. After weeks of non-stop work, she finally has an opportunity to relax. While spending the morning at the mansion, she asks Tasia whether she has any plans for the day. Tasia casually replies that she does not. Then, as though suddenly struck by inspiration, Tasia's expression brightens dramatically. Excitedly, she reveals that she has been thinking about hosting a tea party at the mansion. Before Risa can react, Tasia eagerly says that she has a favor to ask. The moment Risa hears the word request, a familiar sense of dread begins creeping into her mind. Based on her previous experiences, she has already learned that whenever Tasia becomes this enthusiastic, things usually become very troublesome very quickly. And judging from the sparkle in Tasia's eyes, this request is almost certainly going to be one of those times. The story continues on the morning after Risa spends her day off at the Claude Mansion. As usual, the sun has only just risen when she arrives at Café Omusabai. However, unlike her normal energetic self, she looks noticeably tired. The moment she enters the cafe, she gives a sleepy greeting. Both Helena and Zeke immediately return her greeting. Meanwhile, Helena is unusually cheerful. With sparkling eyes, she enthusiastically declares that another wonderful day of work awaits them. Risa notices her excitement right away and comments that Helena seems to be in an exceptionally good mood today. Helena proudly explains the reason. Now that she has fully paid off the debt for the repair costs, she is no longer working merely as compensation for her mistakes. From this day forward, she is officially an employee of Café Omusabai. For that reason alone, she is incredibly happy. However, that is not the only reason for her excitement. She admits that she has always adored the uniform worn by the cafe staff. The fact that she can now wear it every single day makes her even happier. Risa looks confused and asks whether the uniform is really that special. The question immediately leaves Helena speechless. After a brief moment, she begins passionately explaining that the uniform was designed by Cheryl Mary, one of the most famous fashion brands in the kingdom. According to Helena, the brand is renowned for its impeccable tailoring, luxurious materials, and elegant designs that perfectly combine tradition and innovation. She continues explaining that countless young women dream of wearing Cheryl Mary clothing at least once in their lives. For this reason, simply being allowed to wear the uniform is something many people would envy. As Helena speaks with increasing excitement, Risa can only stare blankly. Eventually, she turns towards Zeke and asks whether he knew any of this. Zeke calmly replies that he did not. The answer causes Helena to nearly explode in frustration. She loudly complains that both of them have been wearing such prestigious clothing without even realizing its value. According to her, there are probably customers who return to the cafe simply to admire the uniforms. Listening to all of this, Risa suddenly realizes just how famous Tasha's company truly is. At that moment, Helena notices Risa's distracted expression. Curious, she asks whether something happened. Zeke also notices that Risa has seemed absent-minded ever since she arrived. After a moment of hesitation, Risa finally explains the reason. The previous day had been overwhelming. Simply hearing Tasha's request had nearly shocked her into silence. The story shifts briefly to the previous day's conversation. When Tasha had mentioned a high society debut, Risa had immediately reacted with disbelief. Meanwhile, Tasha had seemed completely confused by her reaction. She had pointed out that Risa is officially the daughter of House Claude, a noble family carrying the rank of Marquis. For that reason, attending such gatherings should not be unusual. However, Risa had practically panicked. The words high society immediately brought a very specific image to her mind. She imagines elegantly dressed noble ladies and gentlemen gathering beneath magnificent chandeliers. She imagines glamorous banquets, ballroom dances, extravagant celebrations, and countless influential people observing every movement. To someone who spent her previous life as an ordinary office worker born into a farming family, such an environment feels completely unimaginable. Therefore, she had desperately tried to explain that she could never fit into such a place. She worries that she would only embarrass the Claude family. However, Tasha had immediately dismissed those concerns. She had asked what Risa was talking about. According to her, the upcoming event is actually a rather casual garden tea party. Furthermore, many attendees have already become curious about Risa after hearing stories about Cafe Omusubai. Naturally, they want to meet the person responsible for creating such unusual food. Even so, Risa had continued worrying. She explains that someone with her background could never blend naturally into noble society. She fears making mistakes and bringing shame upon her adoptive parents. At that point, Tasha had turned toward Gil for support. Gil agrees that the tea party is important, but he also gently reminds Tasha not to pressure Risa too much. Nevertheless, Tasha admits that she has wanted to introduce their beloved daughter to everyone for a very long time. Hearing those words affects Risa deeply. At first, she genuinely wants to refuse. However, when she remembers that the Claude family was never blessed with a child of their own, her feelings begin to change. She realizes how much this opportunity means to them. For this reason, she eventually agrees. Back in the present, Helena listens to the story with fascination. She immediately concludes that Risa ended up accepting the invitation after all. Risa confirms this and explains that she spent most of the previous day undergoing an intense crash course in noble etiquette. The memory alone nearly exhausts her. As she recalls the endless lessons, posture corrections, manners training, and tea party preparations, she cannot help feeling tired all over again. Helena sympathizes and comments that being a noble lady sounds incredibly difficult. Risa agrees. The more she learns about noble society, the more she feels that her own world and this one are fundamentally different. For that reason, she sometimes feels guilty toward the Claudes. Despite everything they have done for her, she worries that she may never truly become the daughter they deserve. As she speaks, Zeke quietly listens. After several moments of silence, he finally offers his opinion. His words immediately catch everyone's attention. He says that he does not think any of those concerns are relevant. The statement surprises Risa. Zeke continues explaining. According to him, Risa was literally born in another world. She grew up in an environment completely different from Feliformia. Even so, he has never once felt any distance between them. Then he points toward the cafe itself. He explains that Cafe Omusubai does not deny entry to anyone. Regardless of status, wealth, profession, or background, the doors remain open. Everyone is welcomed equally. As Risa listens, her eyes widen slightly. Helena quickly joins the conversation. She agrees completely. The entire philosophy of Cafe Omusubai revolves around bringing people together. For that reason, Risa should not be afraid of entering a different world herself. Helena then reflects on her own mistakes. She admits that she once rejected things without even trying to understand them. As a result, she only hurt herself. Therefore, she advises Risa not to make the same mistake. If she refuses the opportunity before experiencing it herself, she might regret it later. Then, true to her personality, Helena reveals her final reason. She points out that Risa will get to wear a genuine Cheryl Mary dress. The realization immediately exposes Helena's true priorities. Risa cannot help laughing. She remarks that this was what Helena really wanted to talk about all along. Everyone smiles. After listening to both Helena and Zeke, Risa finally feels her anxiety begin to fade. She sincerely thanks them. More importantly, she begins understanding something. No matter where she goes, whether it is a humble cafe or an aristocratic tea party, the things she wants to accomplish never really change. She still wants to connect with people. She still wants to share food. She still wants to make others happy. Those goals remain the same regardless of the setting. With those thoughts firmly settled in her heart, Risa leaves the cafe later that day and heads back to the Claude mansion. There, she seeks out Mary. The maid greets her politely and asks what she needs. After taking a deep breath, Risa explains that she has a request regarding the upcoming tea party. Mary listens attentively, and judging from the determined look in Risa's eyes, it becomes clear that she has finally decided to face the event head-on rather than run away from it.